Welcome, friends. It's Sunday, the 7th. We're so glad you're here. We're going to have a great time. We have a show today with a very familiar face, Shannon, but I haven't been able to stream with Shannon yet before. This is the first. And Shannon, I don't know if you know much about my community, but you're a legend in my community.
I'm so sorry. I didn't hear the last thing that you said. Because I still had music in my ears because I'm an idiot and I had the YouTube channel open because I am not killing it today. Not in the slightest.
Not a problem at all.
My apologies. Do you mind? Hi, I'm Shannon. Nice to meet you, Justin. And I'm so sorry. Do you mind repeating the last thing you said?
I said, Shannon, you are a legend in my community, in the deconstruction community. Absolutely. There are so many people. I discovered you for the first time because so many people said, you have got to see Shannon Q cook Darth Dawkins. And I was like, oh, really?
Do you know what's funny is that I was a last minute replacement in that conversation. I had no idea. Really, the only thing I knew about Darth Dawkins is that he had called into, I think, like Talk Heathen or something. So I'd heard people speak about him, but that was it. And I said, I don't debate, but I'm a conversationalist. I'm happy to have a conversation. And I jumped in and was like, okay, this guy is a precept, and his entire argument is just a circular argument. So I just decided to amuse myself by pointing out his rhetorical strategies to everybody live on air, because there's really no engaging with somebody who's using a script because they're just waiting for their opportunity to go to the next point in their flow chart. That's not a discussion. So I'm glad you enjoyed it. It was a unique experience for me. I actually looked you up yesterday, and I was introduced to you. The first thing I saw you do was the PowerPoint presentation that you did for, I think it was like LionCon or something, on the reliability of the Gospels. And I was like, oh, this guy's amazing. And when I found out I was hosting with you, I was super excited. So I went and I sought out your channels, and I discovered that you are one of the only other people who is crazy enough to have conversations with G-Man. I didn't think anybody. Did you see me talk to him? Oh, that was crazy. Yeah, that guy's wild. He's a blast from the past. Yeah, it's really nice to meet you. I'm excited. You're like an encyclopedia of biblical knowledge. So I'm very much looking forward to learning from you and enjoying our first hosting session together.
I think we're going to have a lot of fun. I had a lot of feedback on social medias once they saw that we were going to be collabing. And so I think there's a lot of people really excited to see your face back on the screen. So I'm pretty pumped. And we should be getting some calls here shortly. We've got one already in queue. If you want to talk to us, dial 720-619-2288. We've got 3 hours in the show. However, a lot of people wait towards the end of the show to call in. I think they're a little skittish at the beginning. But friends, if you wait towards the end of the show to call in, we might not get to talk to you. We want to talk to as many people as possible. And we get it. You might have some ideas that might not sound good when they come out of your mouth, but we'll still talk to you about it. It's okay. We used to hear growing up, there are no stupid questions. The reality is there might be some stupid questions, but we won't make you feel stupid even if you ask stupid questions, because sometimes you have to ask the dumb questions to get to the good answers about reality. So whatever your question is, whatever God you worship, we want to hear about it. We want to talk to you about it. And shoot, maybe you'll present a rock solid argument that could only result in us converting to Christianity today. Maybe. It seems unlikely. Yeah. Maybe.
Many have tried. All have failed. But we'll see. Maybe today's the day.
All right, let's get into it. Dave is from Illinois, a theist from Illinois, says, calling to discuss the resurrection of Jesus, responding to Shannon Q's post on Facebook. So it sounds like we might have kind of a two-part series here. So Dave, welcome in. You're on the line with Justin and Shannon, and you had two kind of things you wanted to address. So before I let you get into it, can you tell us which one you wanted to do first?
Sure. Well, I was coming in to respond to a post that Shannon had actually put out yesterday, I believe. She was asking for the Maximal Data Bros to come in here to talk to her about sort of our version of the case for the resurrection of Jesus. I believe that was the only thing that I had said that I wanted to discuss.
That is exciting to me because I have so many questions about the maximal data approach. I have been, because my partner Apologia responds to a lot of apologists, I've been familiarizing myself with like Lydia McGrew and a lot of what she has to say. And I mentioned on the last show that one of my favorite brands of Christian apologetics is infighting when they argue with each other. And she's been doing a series on Gary Habermas. And it seems to me as the literalist approach in order to be someone who subscribes to the maximal data or undesigned coincidence brand of apologetics. But it kind of stops with the Gospels in the New Testament. So would you mind letting me know if that's the brand that you subscribe to, just so that I make sure that I'm not talking out of turn? Like, what? Give me the elevator pitch of what the maximal data is.
Yeah, I thought it might be helpful to maybe just sort of briefly lay out the argument for people who maybe aren't familiar with the terminology. So kind of it starts with the premise that a premise that, of course, we're prepared to argue for, but starts with the premise that the Gospels essentially represent what Jesus's original disciples at least claimed to be the case. And so if that's accepted, then it generates this trilemma that either what they're saying is deliberately false, it's honestly mistaken, or it's true. We present reasons for thinking that those first two options are highly implausible, which basically leaves you with the third one, that it's true.
So I think what I hold, I don't know if it's that I hold issue with, or what I don't understand fully, is you're hanging your hat, it seems to me, on the Gospels. I'll focus on the Gospels specifically, being written by their labeled authors. So like they were written by disciples of Jesus who were there. So my first question is, how do you get around the synoptic problem?
Could you explain why you think that the synoptic problem, or I personally prefer the label synoptic puzzle, but whichever term you want to use, could you explain why you think that's a challenge to the traditional authorship of the Gospels?
Because of the overlap, right? So there's a couple of different issues outside of the synoptic problem that I think challenge the original authorship. But the synoptic, like if you were writing your own experience, you wouldn't verbatim copy down somebody else's relation of that experience, right? Like, especially if you're Matthew, let's say, like if you're Matthew and you're writing Matthew, you wouldn't word for word, if you're Matthew and you're writing Matthew, you wouldn't speak about yourself meeting Jesus, let's say, which is supposed to be like the most important moment of your life, in the third person. Like that's an issue outside of the synoptic problem. But if you are like somebody just from a psychological standpoint who's writing down your own experience, you don't refer to other people's version of that experience and then copy them verbatim and only change small portions. So that challenges authorship to me.
Okay, good. So there's kind of two issues there. The first is going to be the issue of third person. We don't necessarily have to go down this rabbit hole if you don't want to, but the long and short of it is it's actually not that uncommon for ancient authors of the time to refer to their own experiences in the third person. Julius Caesar, for example, Conquest of Gaul, frequently, in fact, I think always refers to himself in the third person, even though he's obviously recounting his own experiences. So that's not something that's necessarily unusual for ancient literature. And there are other examples of that. There's a good paper by Simon Gaffney called Detailing.
Yeah, I'll grant you that to move on, because that was just one of my examples to show outside of the synoptic problem that I have other problems, but that I think is like the primary issue to contend with when it comes to the authorship.
Yeah, fair enough. And I prefer to focus on that as well. I have some, shall we say, non-standard views on the synoptic problem. So I'm what's known as a Matthean priorist. I believe that the canonical Gospel of Matthew is written first. I'm happy to argue for that, but obviously that's going to take us down a long rabbit hole away from things. If one accepts that, then there's not going to be an issue here, because John is not literarily dependent, or at least not to the same degree literarily dependent on the synoptics. So if Matthew's first and John is not dependent on the synoptics, then the two that are purported to be written by eyewitnesses are not depending on other people or their experiences. So then you've just got Luke and Mark, who are obviously secondhand. Luke directly says he used eyewitnesses as sources, right? So I'd be surprised if he didn't use the Gospel of Matthew.
Okay, so I'm interested, and I think Justin's face tells me that he's also interested in the Matthean priority, because I think that every scholar, every serious scholar anyway, would put Mark as the first gospel. At least that's my understanding. I'm not.
Yeah,
the vast majority of them widely, would. Sorry, go ahead, Justin.
Yeah, it's pretty widely accepted that that is the case. And the reason and why it's so powerful, I think my favorite reason is because the way that they copied Mark wouldn't work if Matthew was the original source. So typically when you've got two different sources that are copying from another source, they'll copy the bulk of it, and then they might change one or two words within it. And what we find is that like the words that are different between Matthew and Mark, the Matthew version doesn't appear in Luke, right? So what we would expect if Mark was copying from Matthew, we would expect that some of Matthew's quotations that Mark copies, we would expect some of Matthew's versions to show up in Luke that don't show up in Mark, but they don't show up in Luke, right? But what we do find is that when we quote from Mark as the original source, we find Luke and Matthew independently tweak a little bit of Mark's stuff, and you can see exactly which one came first based on who tweaked what. And that's why it's commonly held that that Mark is the first.
Okay, I have a little trouble following the argument there, because it sounded question-begging to me, but I might be misunderstanding something. It sounds like you're saying we can tell who tweaked who, but the very language of tweaking is presupposing a particular order.
No. Let me help you understand. So basically, when you have three people quoting something and you want to know who is the original, let's say there's an original source somewhere. Three people are competing for original, right? So you can see that all three quotes might not be perfect. There's minor changes between each, although in some cases they do line up. So for example, we can see sometimes Matthew and Mark don't agree perfectly, but Luke might agree perfectly with Mark, which means he probably was copying from Mark and Matthew changed it. There are cases, in fact, where Matthew, if he came first, we should see at least some cases where Matthew and Mark don't agree perfectly, and Luke agrees with Matthew and not Mark, but we don't see anything like that.
So, I mean, I think that we do. Are you familiar with the so-called minor agreements?
There certainly are minor agreements, but again, we're talking about very specific changes to the Greek ordering of words, or perhaps even the changing of one word to another, or even like corrections. Like we find instances where Matthew seems to be correcting Mark because Mark didn't get something right. Like, for example, in Mark 2, we've got Mark wrongly attributing Abiathar as the high priest when David eats the showbread. Matthew, who was more acquainted with the Hebrew Bible, takes his name right out of it, because Matthew's like, no, that's not what we would expect from that story, right? So even when you look at the supposed corrections, it looks like Mark is the one being corrected typically.
So here's my issue with that, is that I think that that's based on cherry picking the data, because we actually have examples that go the other way around, right? Where, for example, scholars like Mark Goodacre argue on the basis of this putative phenomenon of so-called editorial fatigue that he thinks exists in Matthew and in Luke. he thinks that you have examples of continuity errors in there that don't exist in Mark's gospel. And he explains this by saying, well, look, they changed something and they forgot that they changed it. And so then later on, they included the details from the original story. And now they've got this inconsistency. Now, I could easily argue in reverse that, hey, look, Mark is correcting the errors that the continuity errors in Matthew and Luke, right? So
Mark Goodacre believes that Mark came first.
Yes, he does, and I'm pointing out that there's this inconsistency there in the argumentation.
So,
when Matthew and Luke have the issue, Mark Goodacre, absolutely, he's a strong defender of Mark and priority. But my point is one of the ways in which he argues for Mark and priority is based on Matthew and Luke introducing errors into Mark's material. But now you're trying to argue, oh, but look, corrections to Mark's. So what I'm saying is that the data here is actually mixed, so you can read this either way that you want. It's a reversible argument, is what I'm saying.
Well, I don't think the data is all that mixed, and I don't think it actually addresses Shannon bringing up Mark and priority. The reason why Shannon brought up Mark and priority is because it's clear somebody's copying from somebody else. These are not just completely independent, individualistic accounts of the disciples. And you should know, because it sounds like you've studied a little bit, you should know that like the authorship is a matter of church history. The earliest documents, like Matthew's P1, obviously doesn't have his name on it, right? Like you have to at some point triangulate authorship based on church history, not on the documents that we actually have. I'm not sure that any of it matters. Like I don't think that any of this gets you to the resurrection. Like we can certainly agree that the way the stories describe the disciples seem to be in the story believing he resurrected. I don't think we're disagreeing with you on that.
Yeah, they seem to be the story.
Right.
It seems as though like what my primary interest is when it comes to this specific brand of apologetics is that it seems to hang its hat on the necessity that the authors of the Gospels were eyewitnesses or were like directly sourcing eyewitness accounts, but it seems like there's so much evidence against it, not just the synoptic problem. Like the thing that kind of cinched it for me was these are like fishermen who do not speak Greek as a first language, certainly like right that wasn't their first language, and let alone literate in a way that they were writing in genre specific like formations when they were actually writing things down. They also wouldn't have had access necessarily because of who they are to the Septuagint, which they quote directly and misquote. So the odds of them both being bilingual and literate, and not just literate, but proficient in not just their first language, but Greek, which is what the Gospels were written in, and the scripture that they were referencing, the Bible that they were referencing, the Hebrew Bible they were referencing was written in Greek. We know that because they misquote it and reference it frequently. All of that seems to be a strong argument that these people who were disciples of Jesus or following him around aren't likely candidates to have actually been writing this down. The synoptic problem is just one of many. I think that's a big one. The assumption that these people were educated enough to be bilingual, were rich enough to have access to like writing implements and have the education required to be not only literate like verbally, but proficient in writing in two languages, or at least in Greek. And that they would have access to the Septuagint. All of those seem to be unlikelihoods to me. I mean, Justin can correct me if I'm wrong. He's more of an expert in this than I am. I'm more of a hobbyist when it comes to this type of research. But
yeah, fair enough. I'd love to respond to that if I could.
Sure.
And I'll try to be as brief as I can. The first point I think to point out is just that, strictly speaking, the maximalist argument doesn't like stand or fall on traditional authorship. So if you can find another way to link the gospel accounts to the original, the testimony of the original apostles, you can still make essentially the same argument. But yes, I think the most direct way to get there. Point, then?
Like, aren't you just in the realm of like, in order to do that, aren't you just existing in the realm of speculation? Like you're speculating things without a preponderance of evidence in order to find the appropriate speculation that supports and props up the argument, as opposed to it being based on evidence.
Right. It would depend on how the argument's being made. That's not the way I go about it. The way I go about it just is to argue for traditional authorship. So maybe it would, maybe it wouldn't. I'd have to see the details of how someone.
Well, but you just said that it wasn't necessary. So I'm speaking to you, and the way you go about it is to argue for traditional authorship. But then when I brought up some of the issues about traditional authorship, you said that it wasn't even necessary to address. So I feel as though
I was just making that. I was making that as a preliminary point because you said this argument seems to hang so much on like the traditional authorship of the Gospels. I'm saying, look, there's another way you could do it. Or at least there being eyewitness
accounts or having direct access to eyewitnesses. I think that.
Yes, that it does depend on. So, okay. Regarding the point then that you raised about them being illiterate fishermen, I think this is really only going to apply to John, right? Because Matthew is a tax collector, Luke is a physician, and Mark is specifically writing for Peter, presumably because Peter cannot write himself. So that really is only a problem for John.
Like if he's writing for Peter fucked off though, right? Peter denied Jesus 3 times and then ran away. So even if he was writing, Peter is no longer an eyewitness at that point. So he's no longer an eyewitness to the crucifixion. He couldn't be an eyewitness. He ran away. So even if somebody's writing on his behalf, that's another problem.
Sure, the gospel authors are not going to be eyewitnesses to absolutely everything in their narrative.
Before we move too far forward in the conversation, I don't want the point to be lost that Acts chapter 4, verse 13 says that Peter and John were both uneducated, ordinary men. So we would definitely include Peter in the uneducated, illiterate camp.
Yeah, and I believe I granted that. That's why Mark, on my hypothesis, had to write for him. As for John, if we go with church tradition, I mean, it's said repeatedly that he used a scribe to write his gospel. I think that that's evident from the Gospel of John itself. And we also just know that, like, Paul did that, for example. So I don't find it radically implausible that John used a scribe.
We're in the realm of speculation again. So, sorry, Justin, go ahead.
No, I don't disagree that illiterate men could employ people to write for them. I don't think that's a problem. That being said, the problem that I do have is one that Shannon already brought up, which is that what we have in these Gospels are not what we would expect for a bunch of Jewish men that were following a Jewish rabbi, namely that in the accounts that were given, they're given by people who clearly are separating themselves from the Jewish people and are quoting from the Greek Septuagint. These are not people that are intimately acquainted with the Hebrew Bible. They're not people that are intimately acquainted with Jewish culture. In fact, the Gospel of John over and over again keeps referencing the Jews, the Jews, the Jews, as though he's not part of the Jewish group. In fact, like entire books have been written on this, which is that the authorship of the Gospels seem to be suggested of the fact that this was written for a Greek audience by someone who probably wasn't a member of the Jewish people, at least not proper. Maybe Matthew, at best, you can say he doesn't write his specifically as an outsider of the Jewish group, but he certainly doesn't know. He's not intimate with the details of the Hebrew Bible, which I would expect for someone who is Jewish.
So, I mean,
you would be referencing the Hebrew versions too. One would imagine in Hebrew. Yeah. So I'm just affirming, your go-to wouldn't be the Greek translation, which is less accurate because it's got loads of transcription errors. Like if you're a Jew and that's your first language and the culture that you're raised in, and Jesus was a Jew, you would think that you would want those things to be accurate and as close to tradition as possible, but instead they go to the Greek Septuagint, which kind of seems as though maybe. And I'm interesting. I hadn't heard that they refer to the Jews, and thought about it that way. So thanks for that, Justin. That put a little bug in my ear to go look more stuff up.
And my thought on that is just the Christians are a different group at this point, one who's experienced persecution by the Jews at this point. So it's not that surprising to me that they would refer to them as a sort of an out-group by the time that the Gospel of John is written, for example.
Well, and to be sure, if you do a count on the Gospel of John specifically, there are over 60 instances where who's ever writing it refers to the Jews as like a solidified group as though he's not part of them. So it would be weird to me if you think John was a Jewish person that followed Jesus, that at this point he would find himself as like an outsider of the Jews, because the whole hallmark of Jesus was that he was the Jewish Messiah.
Sure,
Yeah,
but
if you're
then the Jews
segregating
rejected
yourself,
him.
but then why go back and quote their scriptures or a translation of their scriptures? Why incorporate that?
Well, because the
Why
Christians still
incorporate that? If you
regarded
see
them
yourself as separate,
authoritative
why
and
not
so
just?
on.
Okay, so that seems disparate, because on one hand you're saying that they were referring to them as an outsider group because they felt like they were an outsider group, but they're also incorporating what they can from a mistranslation of their holy book.
I don't see
So
what's desperate about that.
disparate? Not desperate, disparate.
Oh, my bad. Okay, I misheard you.
Yeah, it's okay. No, it's okay. I have a Nova Scotian accent. Sometimes words just don't sound right coming out of my mouth.
Fair enough.
Don't you see what I mean?
But sorry,
Like, so if your argument is they saw them as separate and they didn't see themselves as Jews because they just saw themselves as followers of Jesus, then why are they still finding their holy book important to incorporate into their scripture, into their holy book?
Yeah. To me, the
Are they
answer to that
separate?
seems straightforward.
No.
It's that God, or that Jesus himself endorsed the authority of the Old Testament scriptures and taught that the Jews themselves were, not living in accordance with that. So while retaining the authoritative nature of that, they still began to see those who were rejecting Jesus as the Messiah and persecuting them subsequently as an outgroup. That would sort of be my overall explanation for that.
Wouldn't they see themselves as the real Jews then, if that's the case, as opposed to seeing the Jews as something completely separate?
Well, I mean,
They would have
you
seen
have
them
some
as heretics
confusing language
then.
like that.
They would have seen them instead as heretics and not as an entirely separate outgroup, in my mind.
I'm not sure that that's necessarily what we would expect to see there, but yeah, I mean, I guess that's a possibility.
So this entire apologetic confuses me, because if you just say, well, the scriptures are authoritative and they're absolutely true firsthand accounts, then that's just, a self-fulfilling prophecy. You're just saying, this is true, I believe it's true, therefore it's true. So the interesting part to me is the authorship and the literalism, and the on-design coincidences component of it we actually haven't gotten into because we've been stuck on authorship. And I don't even fully understand that aspect of it. Can you just give me a quick elevator pitch of that? Because I want to understand that better, because that's the most confusing part to me. I know that one of them is that the authors wouldn't have known that grass was green at a certain type of year unless they were physically present, something like that. I might be wrong, but that's my understanding, and I want to understand it better.
Sure, and I'll just say I'm not like the biggest enthusiast of undesigned coincidences the way that, say, like Lydia McGrew would be, but I can definitely explain how the argument is supposed to function.
Okay.
Yeah, okay. So basically the idea is it's a unique form of multiple attestation is, I think, the best way to think about this, so you can kind of see what conclusion it's trying to get you to. The idea is that you have multiple elements in different gospels that are saying the same thing, but not like in the same word. So it's sort of casual interlocking of details that supports an overarching whole behind them. And so in that way, it's like you're getting multiple attestation, but the reason it's so valuable is because it's supposed to be independent because of the casualness there. It's not something that's like, it's not something that could have been taken over just from, the bare text of the other gospel. So the value in it is that it's supposed to be a form of multiple attestation.
Can you give me an example? Because I still don't fully understand, because it just sounds like if two people are writing about, like, so if Justin and I were both writing a book about New York, and we both referenced that we were on 42nd Street at some point in time, then that would be evidence that everything that we wrote is true, that we were actually there, because that's mundane, but is an actual place in reality.
So
that
if you're both independent sources, right? If you're both independent sources saying that some event happened on this street, that's good evidence that the event happened on that street, right? What complicates things in the case of the Gospels, right, is of course that there's literary dependence present here. So to what extent, right, is the material independent? So the value that's supposed to be seen in undesigned coincidences is that this is not stuff that's directly stated in the text, right? So with the green grass example, that's supposed to interlock with, I forget which gospel it is, but one of the gospels designates the feeding of the 5,000 specific time of year when the grass would have been green. So what you get is the corroboration that, okay, we're getting this fuller picture here, right? These two things are corroborating that the event happened at this time of year, but they're doing so in a casual way, right? So it's not both just saying, oh, the event happened this time of year. One is specifically saying it happened this time of year. The other one is indirectly corroborating that by saying the grass was green, which we independently know would have been green that time. So that's the basic idea.
But they had access to each other, though, right? So if you're saying, well, Mark said that this happened in the spring, but doesn't mention grass, and then Matthew says that this event happened and the grass was green, but doesn't mention that it was spring, you're saying that the fact that even though they had access to each other, the mundane details are augmented or directly referenced that reinforce the time of year. That's evidence that what they're saying is a true statement and that they were actually there. I just don't know how you get from one to the other. One, because they had access to each other. And two, because it doesn't mean anything really about the truth of what they're saying or that they had access to firsthand accounts. Like, to me, it could just be like people knew that in spring the grass was green. They were familiar with the area. So one of them chose the literary device to describe the surroundings, and the other one literally said what time of year it was. And that doesn't support the truth of anything either said.
Yeah, so I think the idea is that if one of them is trying to add additional corroboration to the other gospel, then then the idea is that they're just going to say it, right? They're going to flat out say it and not sort of bury it in the text in this detail, saying like that the grass is green, for example, that somebody might just easily overlook. I agree with you that this is not like, certainly, particularly even just like one example, is not going to like get you to everything in there is true. The idea is that when you have multiple examples of this interlocking together, it doesn't look like they're deliberately trying to corroborate each other. So you get some degree of evidential support that there is a greater whole sort of lying behind the story. That's
they're already like verbatim copying each other. So I don't know if you could be more deliberate about copying somebody than doing it verbatim, and then there being like a mundane difference in a descriptor of a scene.
So I think
both that doesn't
perhaps
doesn't seem to give it any more support, and it's already deliberate, just definitionally.
I think that what might be going on here is that you're thinking because there's literary dependence present, that means that this other gospel that's being copied from is therefore the only source for the information present there.
No, I don't care if it's the only source. No. That was just a counter argument to you saying that they're not deliberately attempting to cooperate each other, and copying each other does.
They're not deliberately attempting to, with respect to the area that the undesigned coincidence connects on. Not obviously in other areas where one is verbatim copying the other, then obviously that's going to be a more deliberate attempt at collaboration or corroboration. Rather.
So when they trail off and write their own stuff as opposed to actually just copying word for word, the fact that there's mundane details when they are writing independently and not just copying, that could line up with the parts that they have access to is evidence of what, that they were actually there? Like, what is this evidence towards?
Evidence that what they're reporting is true because you have multiple independent attestation.
But it's not independent attestation at that point in time.
No, they're not independent. The moment you copy from somebody else, it's not independent attestation.
Well, and so that's why I was going back to the thing where you were saying it seems like you think this might be the only source then if there is literary dependence there. And that's something that the maximalist is going to absolutely push back on and say that you can have partial dependence, but you can also have partial independence. And so that's what undesigned coincidences are intended to argue, that you have independent material in there as well.
I don't think the only source for the Gospels are the other Gospels. I mean, like there's the hypothesis about the Q source, which I think is interesting. There's also the fact that they were referencing the Septuagint. There was oral tradition. Definitively, there was absolutely oral tradition at the point the Gospels were being written that would have been referenceable as well. The churches were already being established specifically by Peter and Jesus' brother James, I think, at that time as well. So there were leaders, and there were known things that about the Q source. I think, if Justin can correct me, I believe it's like a sayings of Jesus is what it's hypothesized to be. So I don't think that they are just referencing each other. I think they have other external things that they can reference from whilst they're compiling. But if anything, that's more evidence that it's not an independent firsthand attestation, because they have so many different sources to draw from at that time, which is evidence against them being firsthand accounts or direct recountings of firsthand individuals who were there firsthand that they have access to.
Sorry, can you explain why having access to multiple sources is therefore evidence against independence?
Because if they have access, like if I'm writing down what I saw, I'm not gathering a bunch of data about what other people saw and what other people are saying about what happened and what other people think happened in order to compile and articulate my experience. Once you start incorporating other people's information into the story that you're writing, it is no longer an individual's experience, it's an aggregate, which is definitionally not an individual experience.
You're arguing that this is evidence against them being eyewitnesses, not that it's evidence against them incorporating independent tradition.
It's evidence that the Gospels aren't direct first-hand accounts, whether that be written by a scribe or written by the individual.
Okay, but those are two different things, right? They can preserve independent materials, and that's all undesigned coincidences is trying to get you to, is that you've got multiple independent corroboration of something here. It's not trying to get you to that this is written by Mark, Luke, and John.
So what you're saying is the Gospels don't actually need to be first-hand accounts for your argument, right? They don't, or a scribe writing down somebody else's verse. Instead, they're aggregates of what everyone around was saying at the time.
No, I think, so my particular argument for the resurrection does depend on the Gospels being written by Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Don't have a problem with that. I was saying the argument from undesigned coincidences, which, again, we moved on to that from the resurrection, that's an argument that you have partial independence of material in the Gospels, not that they're written by eyewitnesses or whatever, although it's compatible with that, but it's not intended to argue for traditional authorship.
Yeah, well, I mean, that they're not verbatim the same. Otherwise, it would just be Mark, 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 and Mark. Right? So there are differences between them, obviously. That's why they're separate Gospels.
Yeah. And to reinforce Shannon's position, and I think it's a good one, which is, listen, if we had 4 independent accounts of like, hey, here's the account of somebody that was there, and they described a lot of the same stuff, man, that'd be really cool. But most of the Gospels are just copying, right? So they don't really count real well as independent witnesses when the majority of them are copied.
Okay, well, the majority of John is not, right? So we could agree that John, at least, does not fall prey to this criticism? Okay, so that's John,
I think the
and then
problem
whatever
we have with John, though, is that John contradicts the synoptics over and over again. For example, did Jesus clear the temple in John chapter 2, or did he clear it right before the Olivet Discourse? Did he clear the temple twice?
Yeah, my position is that he did. I think, the whole argument there is a contradiction, assumes there's one temple cleansing.
Yeah, so Jesus walked in, cleansed the
It forces you
temple.
to literalist position.
And then 3 years later, he walks in and does the same thing over again. And this is what we find. There's so many contradictions between John and the synoptics that you have to come to absurd conclusions. Like, he called his disciples twice, if you look at the narrative. And I'm sure with that contradiction, you would agree. Well, he called his disciples twice, right? Because one, he calls them.
I'm not sure what the contradiction's supposed to be there.
Okay, well, let me ask you before we start into it. How many times do you think how many times do you think Jesus called his disciples? Once. Now, if you're actually reading the synoptics against John, what you'll find is that he had to have called them twice. In fact, we can go through the story. Give me 1 second to... I'd pull it up, but you can't see it. But so in John, what happens immediately after his baptism?
You have to refresh my memory.
Right. He calls the disciples. I'll pull it up and we'll read through it real quick. So baptism is John chapter 1. And we're going to go down to we'll go to verse 34. So it says, this is at the baptism. It says, and I myself have seen and has testified that he is the chosen one. Verse 35, on the next day, John again was standing with two of his disciples, and he watched Jesus walking by and exclaimed, look, here is the Lamb of God. The two disciples heard him say this, and they were following Jesus. When Jesus turned and saw them following, he said to them, what are you looking at? For he said to him, Rabbi, which is translated teacher, where are you staying? He said to them, come and see. They came and saw where he was staying, and they remained with him on that day. It was about 4:00 in the afternoon, and so on and so forth. And then we get the call of the disciples. On the very next day, we get Philip and Nathanael called. So the problem we have here is, boom, we get the baptism. Boom, we get the call of the disciples. That's it. In the synoptics, what happens after his baptism? Where does he go?
Again, you'll have to refresh my memory.
In the synoptics, he goes immediately into the wilderness. So he goes into the wilderness. He's gone for 40 days in the wilderness. And then when he comes back from the wilderness, he calls his disciples.
Is that directly like, and again, this is not a contradiction that I've claimed to have looked at recently, but is there like a specific time index statement there, or is it just like the story is told after this point, or does it specifically like give you a statement saying it happened after this time in the wilderness?
No, it's in that order, right? It says, and a voice came from the heavens saying, you are my son, the beloved, with you whom I am well pleased. The Spirit immediately drove him into the wilderness. So immediately after the heavens open up in the Gospel of Mark, he's driven into the wilderness.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say this is not one that I have looked at in a long time. So, I mean, I'm happy to say I don't know on this one. Generally, with these sorts of chronology or putative chronology discrepancies, I've typically found that you don't necessarily have the time index statements there, and so it's just it's based on, oh, well, they told it in this order, so therefore they thought it happened in that order. But
immediately is a time index statement. Is immediately not a time index statement.
If you're saying that this is an example where you have that, then this is obviously one that I will look into. But yeah, I'm not gonna, pretend I have an answer for you on the fly here when I haven't looked at it.
I respect that.
And then we find the same thing with the woman who anointed Jesus with oil prior to his passing. If you compare John to the synoptics, it's the wrong number of days before the crucifixion. They differ. Like the timeline of John just like specifically contradicts the timeline of the synoptics over and over again. And in this one, with the anointing of oil, it gives you the number of days. Like it specifically tells you the wrong number, or we'll say differing number of days.
And do you also have that in the synoptics?
Yeah, I'll show you. Well, again, I can't show you because I keep forgetting. I have no method for showing you things here, but we can read it for you. In John 12, it says, 6 days before the Passover, Jesus came to Bethany, the home of Lazarus, whom he had raised from the dead. There he gave dinner to him. Martha served, and Lazarus was one of those reclining with them. And Mary took a pound of costly perfume and made of oil nard, anointing Jesus' feet, so on and so forth. We know the anointing story. So in John, it's 6 days prior to the Passover. But if you go to the synoptics, for example, in Mark 14, it says, it was 2 days before the Passover and the festival of unleavened bread, and the chief priests and scribes were looking for a way to arrest Jesus by stealth and kill him, for they said, not during the festival, or there may be riot among the people. While he was there at Bethany, in the house of Simon the leper, he sat at the table, and a woman came with an alabaster jar of very costly ointment of nard. She broke it open, and opened the jar and poured it out on his head, so on and so forth. And we get the same thing where the disciples see the woman pouring out the oil and they, oh my gosh, we could have sold this for money and given it to the poor. And Jesus says, leave her alone. She's done a good service for me. The poor will always be with you. The only way to reconcile these contradictions is to say, well, it happened twice, or it's just, it was a contradiction.
Yeah. So I'll say two things on this. Again, this is not one that, necessarily prepared to deal with on the fly. This does look like one where I'd be willing to say that this looks like the sort of thing that somebody just easily forgot, instead of directly trying to contradict another gospel, somebody just remembered the days wrong. That's something I'd be open to, and I don't think that would challenge the substantial trustworthiness of the narrative.
But mundane overlaps are evidence that it's true. Why are direct contradictions in the timeline and in the series of events and the events themselves not evidence that it's not? That doesn't seem consistent to me, I guess.
So all contradictions are not equal.
Yeah,
some contradictions, particularly if they are the result of a deliberate change. So like an author was like, yeah, I think it happened this way, but I want to change it to this. That I think would be evidence against reliability. Now, on the other hand, if it's a contradiction that emerges as the result of somebody remembered something wrong, so it's not an intentional.
How would you know the difference? But you don't know who the authors are, so how would you know their intentions one way or the other?
Well, I mean, I think we do know who the authors are, but we can put that aside.
I disagree, but okay. But even so, you wouldn't know their intentions, right? You can't go back to 2000 years on the shoulder and go, why'd you change this?
Yeah, it's going to be a case of, is this the sort of thing that you could plausibly explain that way or not? So obviously there's going to be some conjecture involved there, as there are going to be with discrepancies in any historical sources.
Yep.
Right. But the discrepancies are important because if they're independent witnesses, they should agree on most things. And there's so many things that are major that they don't agree on, like what happens immediately after his baptism. What were his last words? John and Luke disagree. What time was he crucified? John and Mark disagree.
What's his lineage? Who found the empty tomb?
Yeah,
who found the empty tomb? What's his lineage?
Did Mary go to the tomb alone first, as it said at the beginning of John and the ending of Mark 16, or did she go with the women? Did Mary Magdalene go to the tomb twice? Because if so, the second time would have been with the other women, and they shouldn't have been debating about whether or not Jesus was going to get his body anointed and who's going to roll away the stone. Like, if Mary Magdalene was already there, already saw that Jesus wasn't there, she's not going to go a second time with the women, and they're not going to debate with each other about who's rolling away the stone. And they're certainly not going to bring oils and spices to spice the body because Mary Magdalene already knows the body's not there.
And did they say nothing, or did they tell people?
With respect to a lot of these, I think that we're dealing with differences that are being just forced to be contradictions. For example, different genealogies, different lists of women going to the tomb, and so on and so forth. I didn't say the list. No, hold on. You don't get ahead of yourself. I didn't say the lists of women contradict each other. What I said is, if Mary Magdalene was the first one at the tomb before sunrise, as John says, and she saw that Jesus was not in the tomb and that the stone had been rolled away, then when she goes the second time in the synoptics, those stories don't make sense anymore.
it says as they're going to the tomb, and Mary Magdalene is with them. It says they're debating among themselves who will roll away the tomb. It says they're going to spice his body. They're not going to spice his body if Mary Magdalene had already been there and seen that he wasn't there and that the tomb was already open. And they're not going to be debating who's going to roll away the stone because Mary was already there and already knew.
Can you tell me which passage in John you're going to that says that he was there first before the other women?
Yeah, it's in John 21 or 20. I think it's in 20. Yeah, verse 20, verse 1, or chapter 20, verse 1. Says, early on the first day of the week, while it was still dark, Mary Magdalene came to the tomb and saw that the stone had been removed from the tomb. So she ran to Simon Peter and the other disciple. And this is corroborated in Mark. If you go to Mark chapter 16, towards the end of the chapter, it says, now after he rose early on the first day of the week, he appeared first to Mary Magdalene, from whom he had cast out 7 demons. She went out and told those who had been with him. So if that's the case, if she saw him first, then the other Gospels, when it talks about them walking to the tomb, figuring out who's going to roll away the stone, and it says that Mary Magdalene was there, those stories are silly stories if Mary Magdalene already knew that Jesus wasn't there and that the tomb was open.
I'm not seeing why we're assuming that she's alone in John and in Mark. I'm not seeing any statement saying she did this alone.
Well, it makes it worse if there was other people with her. But it does say that he appeared first to Mary Magdalene. And in John, when Jesus appears to Mary Magdalene, where is everybody? Are they there?
Nope.
No, they're not there. So what we read is that it's just Mary Magdalene that has the appearance of Jesus first.
Yeah.
That's why it says,
I'm still not seeing what the issue is supposed to be.
So he appeared first to Mary Magdalene. She was there at the tomb alone when it happened. There was 2 trips.
Are you saying that there's no evidence she was alone? Is that what you're trying to get out of here, Dave? I'm confused.
I'm saying there's no evidence that she's alone when she initially goes to the tomb. So the reconstruction of events that I would take to be plausible here is going to be something like John Wenham proposes an Easter enigma where, the women leave except for Mary, and that's when she has her appearance of Jesus. Point being, you could say I don't like that or it's implied, but the point is it just doesn't have to be a contradiction here as far as I can tell. I don't.
So you're saying that even though they're not referenced at all or part of the story in John, they were in fact there. So that the other stories where they're explicitly mentioned makes sense.
Correct. To have a contradiction, you have to have 2 mutually exclusive statements. Mentioning one person without mentioning other people is not incompatible with saying there's other people there.
So you're harmonizing the difference between the Gospels by just assuming that they were left out. Like, so you're just speculating, well, these women were just omitted from John, even though they were included in the other 2.
I'm saying there's no reason that couldn't be the case, and so this does not have to be a contradiction.
That is such a sand foundation to. Like, it seems like every time like there's a corner, the harmonization is just like, well, maybe there's a way. Like the direct contradiction, which I respect that you said you have to go back because there was like immediately is, an indicator of time. Immediately means something in relation to like a timeline. So I appreciate that you're actually going to go back and look at that. But it seems like anywhere that there's even the slightest amount of non-explicit statement or like any ambiguity, you're just like, okay, well that just means that I can assert that there's no difference.
Right. But there is a direct contradiction if you read it carefully, because it says that Mary Magdalene went there before sunrise.
I would make the same point with you, with all due respect. I think you're inserting things in there, like when it says Mary went to the tomb, she went there alone, right? Things that are not said in the text.
I said before sunrise.
Ambiguities, and so you're saying contradiction.
What I said was before sunrise, Dave. Before sunrise. That's what it says. Early on the
With,
first day of the week,
with respect to what?
while it was still dark. While it was still dark. In the other Gospels, the women as a group go after the sun has risen. It says, when the Sabbath was over, Mary Magdalene and Mary, the mother of James, and Salome brought spices so that they might go and anoint him. And very early on the first day of the week, when the sun had risen, they went to the tomb. So there's obviously two groups of people going to the tomb, or there's a direct contradiction as to what time it happened.
I mean, it seems like it's saying it's happened early in the morning. As to, the precise location of the sun, that feels like a nitpick to me. We're going to say the source can't be trusted because it had a little bit of a difference with the other ones as to whether or not the sun was up yet.
If these are all eyewitness accounts, they shouldn't agree as to whether or not it was still dark or whether or not it was, in fact, after the sun had risen. And they sure as heck shouldn't disagree on to which day Jesus was crucified. In John, he's crucified over the Passover so that he can be symbolized as the Passover lamb. In the Synoptics, it's a day before that. They're off by a whole day.
I mean, do you think that these sorts of disagreements don't regularly occur in eyewitness testimony? Is that what you're saying?
No. What I'm saying is that to be off by an entire day about what day your Messiah was crucified is preposterous, especially considering that this is supposed to be the most important event of all of history. God couldn't take care to make sure that his supposed eyewitnesses recorded a coherent story.
Well, remember, we're not arguing on the basis of divine inspiration. We're just arguing for general historical credibility here, regardless of.
Well, I don't think it's historically credible. Which
I get it, but your criticism right then was based on the assumption of divine inspiration.
No, my criticism wasn't about divine inspiration. I mean, that obviously could emphasize my point, but I don't think it's historical. You want to hear why I don't think that these are like accurate historical accounts?
Sure. I mean, is it going to just be more contradictions, or are there other reasons?
No, there's a lot of good reasons. Namely, that we've got lots of supposedly historical accounts of people doing miracles, resurrecting from the dead, and all kinds of nonsense, and you don't believe that. Like, there's a really interesting tale about Aristeas. He was supposedly resurrected from the dead after he died in a fuller's shop, and there are about 8 different sources from historians that record his resurrection and even claim that they knew the people that he appeared to after his death. But you certainly don't believe that Aristeas rose from the dead and became a demigod, do you?
I have no idea. I'd have to look at the, Squartz's quality of it. I'm certainly skeptical going in. I don't, just say because you have these sources, but I'd be curious.
Herodotus, Pliny the Elder, Apollonius, Diodorus of Sicily, Plutarch. Do you think these are actual histories, or do you think they're telling mythologies? Because the names of their books are the histories. Herodotus book 4 is literally titled histories.
Yeah, so some of them are more historically, I give a little more credence to than others. Right. Plutarch, for example, I don't give as much credibility as I would Pliny, for example.
Plutarch makes almost as many historical mistakes as Matthew. But in Herodotus, he says, what follows I know happened to the people of Metapontion. And then he talks about how they saw the resurrected Aristeas. He says, I know it happened. That we have historical accounts of all kinds of bombastic claims, and at no point would I take them to be legitimate accounts. The same when I'm reading like Tacitus and Suetonius, and they're relating these historical tales, and then they also say that Zeus sent down lightning as a sign that this emperor was meant to be the next emperor. I take that part as being mythology. When I read the Gospels, I'm saying, yeah, these people are attempting to tell some kind of history, but when it gets to walking on water and healing people and all the resurrections, those are the parts that I take as mythology, because that's how you're going to treat every other book with similar claims. I'm actually just being consistent. I'm saying, listen, these Gospels are purporting to be history, and what I know about Greco-Roman histories is that they include lots of mythological claims. And I don't believe any of those mythological claims, and by the same token, I certainly wouldn't believe the mythological claims of what we find in the Gospels, especially considering that they're so contradictory, and also because Jesus is basically committing blasphemy. The Trinity is logically unsound, and he fulfilled precisely 0 messianic prophecies, which means his resurrection is putting the cart before the horse.
Okay, a lot to put on the table there. I think the general point to make here is that
I know that was a lot. I'm done.
Okay. I think this probably comes down to a epistemological difference with our credence towards miraculous events. So I agree that generally if it's a sort of fantastic seeming miraculous event, I'm going to require more evidence to believe that than I would anything else. But I don't also think I can just outright dismiss it, right? Because it'd be question begging to assume in advance that miracles just don't happen, right? So if we're not going to presuppose that, then I do think we have to keep an open mind to those sorts of things. Generally,
what's
when
the
I
difference
have
between
looked
how
at
you? Sorry, I just for the sake of clarity, what is the difference in epistemology? Because you referenced it yourself, between when you look at the other, historical, phantasmagorical stories that were written that Justin was referencing, and when you look at the Gospels, do you assess them both using the same exact criteria, or is there something special
At least I'm consciously trying to, if I do, right? It's possible, of course, that I'm unconsciously being inconsistent because of bias or something, but certainly I'm not like consciously giving Christian beliefs a free pass. The reason why I tend to be more skeptical of these other miracle claims is that when the ones that I have looked at don't seem to have a comparable quality of evidence. So, for example, if you're familiar with, I think it's the miracle of Zaytun, this supposed Catholic miracle, right, where Mary is supposed to have appeared to thousands of people. Or maybe it's Fatima. Sorry, what'd you say?
I said I think that happened in Egypt, didn't it?
Okay.
In Egypt, where Mary
appeared
to I could be wrong.
In any case, like when I looked into this one, because a lot of my Catholic friends are telling me like, oh, there's so much good evidence for this. Like, there were just things that looked suspicious, like it involves people like looking directly into the sun, and like, well, it's probably kind of not surprising that people are going to start seeing things if they look into the sun for long enough and things like that. We don't actually
have. That's what you get when you have thousands of independent witnesses. Some of them are going to have witnesses that aren't trustworthy, but the thousands that were in agreement should prove that it's real. That was your
I don't know. If they see it while they're looking at the sun, when they see it when they're looking at the sun, that seems suspicious to me.
Did it say all of them were? All of them were staring at the sun till they saw hallucinations, or did you add that to it?
That's what it's supposed to. She's supposed to have appeared in the sun, so they're all looking directly at the sun. And I would also add there's a bunch of witnesses.
If God is going to perform a miracle with the sun, do you think that maybe he would do it so that they can see the sun? Because in the Bible, they saw the sun stand still in the book of Joshua, and also in the book of Isaiah, or not in the book of Isaiah, during the prophethood of Isaiah, the sun also moved back as well on the sundial. They were watching the sun for both of those instances. Don't you think that if God's going to do a miracle of the sun, he's going to imbue them with the capability of looking at the sun without going blind?
Sure, but we're talking about what is the evidence here. I'm saying that the
Matthew
witnesses
27, it happened. Hundreds of zombies came out of the tombs.
Matthew zombies are my favorite.
I'm saying that
nobody wrote about that one in history.
Well, that's also.
You think somebody would be walking down the street going, "What the fuck?" The day the zombies came.
But I think
or all the firstborn children being killed. That would have, or where Jesus went with his family after they left Bethlehem. Was it Egypt or anyway? Sorry, but.
Well, we'll pick a topic, Shannon.
It's so hard. There's so many to point to. That's the thing. But yeah, no, sorry, to go back to Justin's sun thing. Like it's like the zombies I was referencing because Justin's point is, well, you're saying it couldn't have happened because they stared into the sun, but if you're already saying, well, miracles can happen, which you are, because the resurrection is a miracle.
I didn't say.
Why couldn't God do it?
I didn't say it couldn't. I didn't say it couldn't have happened because they're all looking at the sun. I'm saying the witnesses in this case claim to have seen something under conditions under which we know that like eyesight is just going to be impaired anyway. And so like if that's all your witnesses,
but it's a miracle.
That's a significant. significant.
It's not
well,
all,
maybe it is, but the point is,
it's not all
we
the
don't. We
witnesses,
can't really
and it's a
assess
miracle.
this on the basis.
That's the fun thing
We
about
can't
a
assess
miracle.
this on the basis.
The witnesses are the
We
proof that the
can't
miracle
assess
happened.
this.
Can you
Sure,
can
but
you assess the
if the
probability of
evidence for
Jesus
the
resurrecting
miracle,
from the dead without witnesses?
if I could just please finish my point. If the witnesses, if we're supposed to be believing that a miracle happened on the basis of what these witnesses saw, then the witnesses shouldn't be seeing this under conditions under which their eyesight is going to be impaired. It's not to say God couldn't do a miracle in that
It would
case.
be impaired. God did a miracle. That's
Well,
what makes
how do
it
we
a
know,
miracle.
though? That's the question.
Is that God?
The question would
is
be,
that
how do you
God
know?
allowed them to witness the sun without harming their eyes? That's part of the miracle, obviously.
And then what is the basis for believing that?
The witnesses, same as yours.
That's circular.
It's not. So is yours.
No, because witnesses, their reliability is in question precisely because
if the miracle of the sun is only evidenced by witnesses, and that's not good enough, then the resurrection being only evidenced by witnesses also isn't relevant. So you can't say that the witnesses is all you need for something to be true, and then when we give you witnesses for a different miracle, say that, well, the witnesses aren't good enough.
Hold up. I said you need to have credible witnesses here. But if your witnesses are operating under an influence that is known to distort the reliability of one's perceptual faculties, that is going to...
Grief hallucinations are known to impact somebody's psychological situation, especially when you have a bunch of people that literally thought that you were going to be the Messiah that saved them from the hands of the Romans, and then you didn't. You died.
Well, I mean, I'm happy to go into that if you want to, but there's a little bit of
that with me.
Yeah, I do have a question though. Like, why would I believe that Jesus resurrected when A, he couldn't read the Hebrew Bible, and B, he lied about his second coming? It seems like hinging anything on the resurrection is just putting the cart before the horse.
I would disagree with the assumption inherent in both questions.
Okay, well, let's start by the first one, which is maybe my favorite topic in all of the world, which is that Jesus couldn't read the Hebrew Bible, which is why he misquotes it at every turn. He adds to it, and he fundamentally doesn't even understand what's happening in the Hebrew Bible. And to be sure, neither does Matthew. Matthew's even worse. So, for example, when Jesus quotes in Luke chapter 4 that he's fulfilling a prophecy that comes from Isaiah 61. You've probably read Isaiah 61 before, where it says, "The Spirit of the Lord God is upon me because the Lord has anointed me." You know this one?
I'm familiar with the passage, yes.
Yeah, it says he has sent me to bring good news to the oppressed, to bind up the brokenhearted, to proclaim liberty to the captives, release to the prisoners, year of the Lord's favor. Notice how there's nothing in here about sight to the blind. Jesus added that part in, or Luke added that for him, but it certainly isn't in the Hebrew text. But all you got to do is keep reading, and it becomes quite clear that this is not about a Messiah coming to heal anybody. It says to provide for those who mourn in Zion, to give them garland instead of ashes, oil of gladness instead of mourning, a mantle of praise instead of faint spirit. They will be called oaks of righteousness, the planting of the Lord to display his glory. What's the purpose of all this? Verse 4, they shall build up the ancient ruins and raise up the former devastations. They shall repair the ruined cities, the devastations of many generations. Isaiah is giving you a post-exilic prophecy. This is about the restoration of the Israelite people after the Babylonian captivity. The Spirit of the Lord is upon the prophet who's giving the words about God finally coming to rebuild his people after the captivity. Did Jesus make any of this come true?
Sorry, is this supposed to be leading to the conclusion that Jesus wasn't able to read the Hebrew Bible?
This is my conclusion that he's lying about the Hebrew Bible, namely that he's fulfilling Isaiah 61. Isaiah 61 is very specifically about the restoration of Israel after the Babylonian captivity. That's why it says they will build up the ancient ruins and raise up the former devastations. They shall repair the ruined cities, the devastations of many generations. What devastation do you think Isaiah is referring to?
Okay, so the claim, just so I'm understanding, the claim is not that Jesus is illiterate, but that rather he's saying that he's fulfilling things that he's not. Is that correct?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, yeah. This is going to be another one of those topics where Old Testament use of New Testament use of Old Testament prophecy is weird. I know there's theories like double fulfillment and stuff. I don't have firm views on that myself, so I'm not going to try to engage in debate with you on that topic. It's obviously, something that's important to you and that you studied, and I appreciate that. I mean, it's obviously an area for me to give greater study to myself. But I'm happy to acknowledge there's a lot of wonky stuff that goes on with New Testament use of Old Testament prophecies. I myself don't have a firm view on how to handle that.
Well, because there is no way to handle it. You have to admit that the original context of all these prophecies have nothing to do with Jesus. And like Matthew, we would expect Matthew to do dumb stuff. We wouldn't expect Jesus to do this kind of dumb stuff. If Jesus is literally God, he should go into the Hebrew Bible and say, here's a prophecy about me in the original context that I'm fulfilling at this moment. And then he should fulfill it, but he doesn't fulfill it. In fact, he thinks he's fulfilling Daniel 7. Right. Well, if he's a fulfillment of Daniel 7...
Maybe I can leave it at this. I know that there are biblical scholars and stuff who have written on this, have proposed solutions out there. If you were to go through all of that and show that these proposed solutions are actually bunk, I think that would add credibility to the case that you're making. But just suffice to say, I'm probably not going to say because your statement that there's no way to deal with this when there certainly seems to be. It's probably not going to cut it.
I've already been through the sources. Okay, so the only way to square the round peg is to say that A, you can partially fulfill a prophecy. B, prophecies can have two different fulfillments, one of them disconnected from the context. Or number 3, that you can spiritually fulfill a prophecy. All of those two things, I think, are ludicrous. Spiritually fulfilling anything is a meaningless statement. Saying that it has a dual meaning, it disconnects it from its context. The minute you disconnect it from its context, it could be about anything. For example, Isaiah says, I will bring forth descendants. Fuck, I brought forth descendants. Did I fulfill that prophecy? No, because the context actually matters. The minute you remove the prophecy from the context of the prophecy and the original intention of the prophecy, you're just admitting that you don't like what the prophecy was actually about. And the very clear prophecies about the Messiah, all of them, every last one of them, the Christian is forced to admit that they didn't come true and that they'll have to come true at his second coming. But if he didn't do anything at his first coming, I'm certainly not going to believe that he's doing anything at his second coming, which he said was within the generation of his people living there when he was on the planet. Matthew 16, Matthew 24, Matthew 10:23, he said his second coming on the clouds, judging mankind, all of it was going to happen within their lifetime, and then it didn't happen.
Well, again, I would disagree with you there. I'm what's known as a preterist, although not one of the heretical ones, but I am
the worst kind of words don't mean words. Yeah.
Words don't mean words.
I'm sorry, can you explain what exactly you mean by that?
Yeah, preterism is like the top tier of, as long as words have no meanings, all of the prophecies came true. And it certainly is fun to play that word game, but I think anyone who's honest with how words work isn't willing to do that.
Well, then I could just
say that
talking about their kind of words don't mean things.
Are you referencing their dependence on the idea that there is a lot of figurative language?
No, I don't. You have to say they're figurative. I don't, because I've read the Hebrew Bible. So when I read that Jesus talks about being the Son of Man coming on the clouds, I know what that means. I don't have to say that clouds don't mean clouds and temple doesn't mean temple or Son of Man doesn't mean Son of Man. I don't have to do any of that.
Are you referring to the preterist's use of using figurative language to interpret these passages?
What I said is that the way preterists have to view the text is that words don't mean what they actually mean on the page. You have to go to spiritual meanings, figurative meanings. Well, this one time at this obscure verse in the Hebrew Bible, this one word shows up that was used in a different way. So now we have to use it in that way forever, which is ridiculous. Like the witness of heaven and earth, the way that gets used in the Hebrew Bible is completely misconstrued when we talk about the new heaven, new earth in the New Testament. One of the worst talking points of preterism, hands down. It's an embarrassing talking point.
Okay, so I think we obviously have some deep disagreements here. Do you want to go down the rabbit hole of that, or do we want to try to go back to the resurrection?
Well, I don't think it really matters because you can't prove that the resurrection happened. We already demonstrated that the gospel accounts can't agree on the details of it. It reads just like other ancient mythologies about resurrections. And unless you have something other than, well, I believe what the gospels say, then I don't really think you have an argument for the resurrection actually happening.
Well, I mean, I think I did present one, right? It's given that the Gospels represent what the original apostles actually claimed, then you have the trilemma.
Well,
and given that the first two can be shown to be sufficiently improbable, that leaves you with the third option, namely that it happened.
No, I don't think that's conclusive at all. In fact, I don't even think it follows. The conclusion doesn't follow. It could certainly be that they were tricked. It's not a fallacy.
That would fall into the category. That would fall into the category of being honestly mistaken.
Yeah, they certainly could be honestly mistaken, and there were a lot of people who pretended to resurrect and fool a bunch of people in the ancient world. So, I didn't say you.
Well, that would mean that the resurrection didn't happen. Like your argument says. Not a fallacy,
then the conclusion.
But your argument says that those are the options, and then says that that's not the case, and then moves on to its conclusion, assuming that option isn't.
I would have loved to discuss those two options with you here.
And again, David, if you pay attention for 5 seconds, nobody accused you of committing a fallacy. So I don't know why you're getting hung up on that.
You said you don't think the conclusion follows.
What I said was I don't think that the conclusion follows. That's not a fallacy. It just talks about whether or not the argument is valid. So I don't think that
if an argument's not valid, the resurrected. It commits a fallacy.
I don't.
It's fallacious. Yes, I agree, but that's pedantry. We can move on.
I don't believe, in fact, that they actually saw the resurrected Jesus. I think it's much more likely that they saw an imposter, which was common in the ancient world. We saw that going down with Nero. Nero had all kinds of imposters that pretended to be him. They tricked many people for decades into believing that he was resurrected, so much so that the Parthians decided that they might go to war, and they even prepared to go to war against the Romans, thinking they were going to march into Rome and put him back on the throne. And in the Gospels, in the Olivet Discourse, Jesus clearly says that people are going to come pretending to be me. He says, many will come in my name saying, I am he, and they will lead many astray. And I think that's exactly what happened. I think there was a goof that said he was a resurrected Jesus, which is why we have these weird accounts where people don't recognize him, where even after he resurrected, his disciples still doubted whether or not it was him. Mary Magdalene couldn't recognize him. The people on the road couldn't recognize him. Is because this reads like just another ancient account of somebody pretending to be resurrected, and people that are grief-stricken, at least one or two of them that saw this supposed imposter was willing enough to believe that it was true, and a whole mythology was created around it. The same way there was a mythology around Zalmoxis, the same way there was one from Alcestis, and the same way with Nero. These are not unique to the Bible. Once you start comparing these to other ancient accounts, there's no reason to believe that those accounts were true, and there's no reason to believe that this account is true. People are, they fall prey to like falling for tricks all the time.
The Perkin Warbeck theory of resurrection. Interesting. That's weird.
I have questions about that theory, which will determine which premise of the argument I think you're actually targeting. Do you think that this imposter stole the body from the empty tomb, actually walked through walls, actually had nail prints in his hands and feet? Or are we saying that no, those accounts don't actually reflect what the imposter was doing?
No, those accounts, first of all, I don't even know they happened. You're presupposing that what the Gospels say happened. I'm not doing that. If I did that, I'd be a Christian.
No.
What I'm saying is that the Gospel account, we don't know at all where his body was placed. We have no idea if it was ever even placed in a tomb. For all I know, he could have been thrown into a mass grave and he became worm food just a couple days later. The reality is, I don't presuppose that any of the Gospel accounts are true. What I do presuppose is that people pretending to be somebody else who theoretically was going to resurrect, or they claim that they did resurrect, happens in history. So I already have some data to work off of that people do pretend to be dead people. It happens. We know it happens, right? So what's more likely? That somebody pretended to be a dead guy, which we know happens in history and people fell for it, or that a guy who lied about his own Hebrew Bible, couldn't read Hebrew, couldn't fulfill a single prophecy, just happened to resurrect, and golly gee, people couldn't recognize him afterwards.
So I think that you're attacking a straw man of the argument. The argument is not that what the Gospels say is true. This is what the argument presupposes, that this is what the apostles claimed to have happened.
I think you're confused about what I'm doing. I'm not attacking your argument.
Okay, so you're just giving what you think happened. I mean, that's fine, but I thought we were discussing my argument.
I'm telling you what is more probabilistically true. That events that we know happen in the real world happened again, or that some dude who could walk on water rose from the dead. One of those things has prior probabilities, and it's not the guy rising from the dead.
I would disagree with the frequentist approach to probability that I think you're assuming there. But sorry, you're saying that this is not a challenge to the argument that I'm presenting?
Do we know for sure that people pretend to be other people that have died?
Perkin Warbeck, that happened for sure. Really historically attested, 100% historically attested. Perkin Warbeck pretended to be one of the princes in the Tower right after the War of the Roses. Richard took Edward's 2 sons and put them in the Tower. They know that they died. We know I believe we found the remains now. But later on, Perkin Warbeck showed up as when Henry VII, Henry Tudor, was king, who had married their sister, Elizabeth, and was going around actually acquiring armies. He was acquiring armies by saying that he was one of the princes in the Tower. I think he said he was the elder of the 2 brothers, who was the rightful king after Richard, even though Henry won the crown from Richard by killing him, I think, at Bosworth Field. But anyway, so that definitely definitively happened in more recent history than this, and is well attested. And the man was able to muster up literal armies in order to try to take the crown. Perkin Warbeck. I don't think
my challenge.
Interesting story.
My challenge didn't regard that you can have imposters. My challenge regarded the frequentist assumption that the way we calculate the probability of an event is solely relative to the frequency.
Well, it's Bayesian analysis, though, right? It's based on prior probabilities, and he would have a higher degree of prior probabilities because he can demonstrate.
It's actually based on frequentism.
What do you? Did you say frequentism?
I didn't hear him.
Yeah, I don't know.
It's called a frequentist interpretation of probability. It's a rival to Bayesian interpretations of probability. But
interesting. Okay.
I have no idea what the difference is, but all I'm saying is we know it happens. We know that imposters happen.
I agree that it happens. I agree it happens.
The 3 Dimitris, and we also know that in general people don't rise from the dead, right? So the reality is I would need some sort of better argument than hey, an ancient book says so, than to believe that Jesus rose from the dead. But listen, Dave, we've talked quite a bit. I actually enjoyed the talk. I think Shannon enjoyed the talk.
Me too.
And
thank you.
I think we got to cover a lot of ground. At least it felt that way. And so I had a good time. Please do call back again, and if we want, we can pick up where we left off. We can do new topics, whatever you want. But I do want to leave room for other callers to call in because it's only a 3-hour show.
Yep, fair enough. Thanks for having me on, Shannon. Sometime you and me got to debate the existence of a soul. But yeah, you have a good one, guys.
I would not recommend you doing that with me, but yeah, sure. Call again.
I'll never understand people that want to use the resurrection as proof that Christianity is true. They should know they can't prove the resurrection happened. It's preposterous.
Yeah, you can't. You have to start by proving the resurrection happened, and then you have to prove that the resurrection happened, and that's what that means. That this is the Son of God, because a resurrection happened in the Bible. Like Lazarus, I think is Lazarus that Jesus resurrected.
Yep.
He wasn't God. So even within
No.
the Bible, there's resurrections that don't annotate that person is then like a divine. So you have multiple steps to get to before you can get there. Like a resurrection is possible, that resurrection happening entails that person has divinity, that divinity is attached to whatever Trinitarian model you happen to have, if you have one. Like there's so many steps, like aside from even just that it happened at all. But
Yeah, for sure.
it seems like every argument, like every time you counter something too, it like pokes a hole somewhere else. Like every time you're able to harmonize one component, you don't realize that it undermines something that you said prior. Like I don't understand how people who make these arguments and listen back to themselves don't see like that dissonance. I struggle against it so much to not have that kind of dissonance. But anyway, thank you, Dave, for calling. I appreciate you answering the call. I've been massively intrigued by the maximal data approach.
The other thing too, which is that, listen, if this story is real, wouldn't a God take care that it was properly recorded in history so that it was actually believable and leave us some verifiable evidence? Like, why would you leave it up to such shoddy historical accounts? It seems like a preposterous thing to do.
Because he's testing our faith, because he loves us so much that he wants he wants us to do it without evidence. Otherwise, he'll punish us forever because he's pure love. That's my understanding.
Oh my God. He loves us so much, he has to light us on fire for all of eternity. Of course.
Yeah.
We're going to get our next guest in here. We're going to get Julian, a fellow atheist from Michigan. Before we do that, the number to call in, guys, if you disagree with Shannon and I, if you think we're idiots, dial 720-619-2288. We'd love to talk to you about your God. It doesn't have to be the Christian God. I get that we're in the Western world, so the Christian God comes up the most, but we don't care what your God concept is. Call in. We'd love to talk about your God concept. I do find some of these conversations about some of the lesser known religions to be more interesting because we actually hear new information. Whereas I think with the Christian talking points, we've heard them so many times that people kind of get bored with them. But still, we'd love to hear whatever concept you have of God. And with that, let's grab Julian. Julian is a historian, it says. Julian, it says you found out about the first Jewish-Roman war involving a strange coincidence, the purpose for the gospel was being written, and from a historical perspective, and then I think we ran out of space. So you're on the line with Justin and Shannon. Can you kind of fill out where you wanted to go?
Yeah, I recently found out about the first Jewish-Roman war from 66 to 70 CE. Biggest notable event being the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem during that. And then just from prior knowledge, I've known that Gospel of Mark was written ballpark 70 CE. So I find that a strange coincidence that this war took place at around the same time the war was ending right at the same time Mark was written. So that leads me to believe that the war was a direct result or even a catalyst for Mark being written. I just wanted to get your opinion on that. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I guess it depends on what you think, like who wrote Mark. So like traditionally Mark is the cousin of Barnabas according to Colossians. So if Mark is the cousin of Barnabas, we would have to ask ourselves, why is he writing post 70? Because the cousin of Barnabas, Mark, certainly would have existed prior to 70. He could have wrote anything he wanted to do prior to 70. So like it just, the authorship of the Gospels does kind of beg some questions, but like, I apologize. Kitty wants to answer the question, but the gospelship of Mark, if it's post 70, right? If that's the case, then the reality is like we have no reason to believe any of the claims in Mark were like legitimately predictive, like the fall of the temple, like you brought up. Like, well, obviously you're just going to write about that after the fact and say that Jesus predicted it during the Olivet Discourse. We have no reason to believe that it's real prophecy.
Correct.
Julian, are you more so saying that you think that the Gospels were written as a result of that war? Like that war somehow sparked some sort of social or political movement that and the end result of which was that the Gospel of Mark was written, like for some political reasons or social reasons. Is that what you're trying to say? I'm just trying to understand your
I would probably say
question.
it'd be more social, because I read a book about this war called the book was called Jews Under Roman Rule by Edith Goodwood or something like that. It was written in the 70s. And it goes into in great detail about the actual conflict, or like what was the state of life during the conflict. But obviously it doesn't go into religiosity or the Gospels at all, but so yeah.
I was just wondering if you were wondering who were the emperor when Jesus died was who? Tiberius, then Caligula, then Nero. Is that the right order? I don't know a lot about the Jewish war.
Because it was
Nero died in
Caesar
68
Augustus when he was born, and it was Tiberius when he allegedly died.
Tiberius when he died, yeah.
Yeah,
okay.
and then Caligula was next after that.
Yeah. So, is there any evidence? I mean, Justin's would be better that, because I know Christianity was existing as like a small, cottage industry at that point in time.
Yeah.
Peter would have still been around, and Paul was roaming around persecuting Christians. So the movement itself existed, but I guess churches, for whatever that means, were being set up. And it was primarily an oral tradition, is my understanding at that point in time. Like there wasn't a lot of written documentation. Could it be that, like, I could see a world where the destruction of the temple, like, made it so that Christians wanted to, like, secure documentation or differentiate themselves specifically from the Jews, if the Jews were themselves being persecuted and Christians wanted to differentiate themselves, but Christians were being persecuted too. I'm just trying to figure out what the motivation would be and how it would connect, unless you're saying that there was like political or social reasons outside of the Christian
I would
movement.
say there would be a social reason, because for this conflict, the Jews had their butts handed to them on a silver platter. So biggest thing I could think of is that it would be a morale boost for themselves. They're saying, "Oh, we still have a God who's fighting for us. That this God hasn't abandoned us," which, to my opinion, would just be a morale boost.
Interesting, but it wasn't. It wasn't all Jews, though, right? Predominantly, the Jews didn't think Jesus was the Messiah, so it was just a subset of pre-existing. Yeah, and so it would have been a subset of the Jews that predated, like, because Christianity predated the destruction of that temple. I guess I can't find the through path, but I also don't know as much about history. I'm just thinking from a psychological perspective. I want one of those cats so badly. I'm so jealous right now. You can't see potentially, Julian, but Justin is just rolling around in adorable little tuxedo cats. I also have a tuxedo cat, but she is an absolute nightmare. She's a tornado full of razor blades, and she's an asshole. She has no tail. Her name is Maddie. She weighs like 3.5 pounds, and she will kill a grown man. So I won't bring her in here because she would just eat my earphones. So I want one of those cats that look like they're adorable. But yeah, I don't know. Justin, do you have better answers? You know more about the history and the timelines and the documentation than I do.
So, I mean, this is actually really interesting because I don't think I fully understood the question at first, but I think I understand what you're saying now. And I do think there's some interesting connection because, for example, we kind of read in the literature that, like, Paul talks about how this trouble has befallen the Jews because of the rejection of the Messiah, right? But, like, at the time, like, if you assume that Mark was written prior to 70, like, what trouble are we really talking about, right? They really seem to want to paint the Jewish people as having missed out on their opportunity and being cast aside in favor of the Gentiles. And all of that really doesn't make sense unless you believe that there's some sort of diaspora that's already occurred. And so we're looking at 68 to 70, and then the other one during the Bar Kokhba revolt. So first of all, if I'm just looking at what the New Testament has to say, it already reads like it happened after 70 AD and also partially in reaction to 70 AD. Because we find later in the early Christian literature, like in Origen and others, they talk about the disasters that came upon the Jews after they rejected Jesus as punishment for what happened. And they specifically talk about the temple. And the temple was a huge talking point because even during the time of Julian the Heretic, right, he allocated funds to rebuild the temple. And then it actually fell apart. They actually never did get to rebuild the temple. And they actually reasoned among themselves, well, it fell apart because God rejected the Jews. So this idea that God rejected the Jews and that's why they're being punished so severely all stems from like a post 70 AD worldview. And so I think that as a reaction to what happened in 70 AD, we see some of the stuff that we find in the literature that we would expect to be slightly different. For example, like Nero. Nero, we talked about previously. We learned that he was almost mortally wounded and then revived of the mortal wounding, and then how he... the mark of the beast is 666. That's just Nero Caesar. If you do Hebrew gematria, or 616 for Nero Caesar in the Latin. And this puts you already past the destruction of the temple, right? Because the Nero imposters, almost all of them were post destruction of the temple. So I do believe there's a certain amount of literature in the Bible that we can definitely say is like a reaction towards what happened to the Jews, specifically at 70 AD, but I don't know how much of it.
Okay.
I think does that better address what we were talking about?
Yeah.
I have nothing to contribute because I don't know enough to have anything of value to say.
Shannon always has something valuable to say. Well,
I always have something to say. Whether or not it's valuable is highly up for debate. Very contentious issue.
Well, Julian, thanks for coming and chatting with us. We really appreciate it. Come back again soon. It was an interesting question. I don't think I've been asked that question before, so we appreciate that.
Yeah. All right.
Cheers.
All right.
That was an interesting question. It took me a second to catch what he was asking, but I thought it was interesting. You caught it right away, Shannon. You knew what he was talking about.
Yeah. So that psychology degree comes in handy trying to figure out what people are getting at every once in a while.
Yeah. So we're waiting for some opposition to call in, or if you're not opposition, you're welcome to call in right now while we're lacking opposition. We do want to make sure that you guys remember that we're going to be at the same time in the following week. So we were a little bit late today, and it was the first time live streaming at this time, 1 p.m. Central, 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We're going to keep doing this on Sunday, every Sunday. However, Skeptalk is still at 6 p.m. Central Time. Chewed Gum, 6 p.m. Central Time. The Wednesday show with Matt Dillahunty is at 6 p.m. And then TACIS, 2 p.m. Central Time. And then we know late night is going to be 7 p.m. On Sunday nights as well. So it looks like just the only time we have to observe changing is going to be on the Sunday main show. So mark that on your calendars, kind of get it into your mental routine to come up a little bit earlier for the Sunday show.
Be better
and
than
that way
Justin
you don't
and
miss anything.
Be better than us. We were not ready. Show us it can be done.
Shannon, your background is in, you said psychology, right?
Yeah, I have a psychology degree from a university called St. Mary's, an honors degree. I did my thesis dissertation proposals on impression formation. So whether or not the perceived control over the direction of an interaction impacts the impression on the interlocutor, which is interesting. And I also studied cognition. So neural anatomy and communication are my primary subject matter expertise. But I'm not a clinician. I know sometimes people think that they hear psychology and they think, oh, you must be a therapist. No, in no way was I a therapist. Ultimately, I actually wanted to work with autistic people in order to be able to assist in creating communication tools and developing communication strategies and therapies. That's what I wanted to do. In order to do that, I needed to know a great deal about neurology and a great deal about communication. And I'm a wee touch autistic myself. Not that that's not glaringly apparent to anybody who's ever interacted with me. So I knew that no matter what I did in my life, I was going to have to interact socially and exist in a world where I communicated with people and had to interact with people. So, and understood people. So I thought psychology would be a good pragmatic course of action in order to arm me with the skills and knowledge that I needed to be successful in the world. So yes, that is my subject matter expertise and my background. What is yours? This is my first time ever interacting with you. So I want to know, what do you do? So I can tell so you studied biblical, did you go to seminary or did you choose, because most people who go down this path start all in for Jesus and then go, oh shit. Does that sound about right? Nobody just walks off the street an atheist and is like, I'm going to get a biblical studies degree.
That's basically it. I went to school initially for electrical engineering and robotics, and then I went to Bible college and then seminary. And I was lucky that I went to school for a real degree first, because then I could still have a job as an adult when I left Christianity. But yeah, I would just like you. I was like you said, I was sold out. I was a Jesus-loving young Christian man that wanted to save the world, but I wanted to be responsible, and I wanted to be able to read the Bible responsibly at my job, and I wanted to be able to actually teach it with some level of authority and not be like an uneducated pastor that just well, here's what I read in my great aunt's email forward that makes sense. That's not how you should teach the Bible. So what I found was when you go to school and you go to actual good accredited institutions, the Bible kind of unravels and you learn stuff that they don't tell you in church. And I think for me, there's a lot of things that early on you learn okay, well, maybe the flood didn't really happen. Maybe Adam and Eve aren't really the first couple. There's stuff you can reconcile with the Bible, but eventually the dominoes keep falling and you're okay, I've made way too many excuses for the stuff in this book that's not true. And then the last domino for me was when I was in Bible college, I started to get really I've always been interested in the Hebrew Bible, but I started to get really interested in the prophetic literature. And it just kind of became clear reading that in Bible college and seminary that the messianic predictions that were made there simply did not come true, which is why the New Testament has to ignore the Hebrew Bible. It has to randomly quote out of context verses that have nothing to do with the Messiah, or verses that aren't even prophetic. Jesus quotes from Psalm 69 and Psalm 41 about fulfilling these messianic expectations. Those aren't even... They're not even prophecies. They're just random out of context quotes from Psalms. So once you get over this idea of okay, well, maybe there's some spurious claims, but then you read all of them, you're oh, all the messianic claims are spurious. Then you're well, we're done here. Jesus didn't do anything, nothing, not a single thing. So he certainly couldn't be the Messiah. So I was an agnostic God believer for a short time after that. And then it was watching a lot of shows like this, actually, that got me thinking about, well, why do I still have this God belief? Is it sensible to have this kind of a God belief? Or is it a remnant of leaving Christianity where I just wanted to hold on to as much as I could, because it made me feel good?
Interesting. I'm always interested in what any individual person's breaking point, because there's so many different ones. Mine came from reading the Bible, because I had a series of crises simultaneously when I was in my 20s, and it coincided with me being studying neuroscience, and so the soul unraveled for me immediately. But the first point that I was able to go okay, so God created man and then created man again. All right, all of this stuff's allegorical probably anyway. It's the Jesus stuff that's important, and the morality is really important. And then I got to Numbers and the test for the unfaithful wife, and I was did God just give someone an abortion?
Yeah.
How am I reconciling this with the fact that I've been told that abortion is evil, the most evil thing, the most evil? thing you could do is killing children. Did God just give not just an abortion, an involuntary abortion, whether that woman wanted that baby or not?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
What the fuck just happened? And Jephthah, I hit Jephthah, and I was like, he killed that girl.
Yeah.
They killed that girl. And God was like, this pleases me. So all of that, and then the rape, like, well, she didn't scream loud enough. So
yeah,
you can buy her that, I guess, and pay her debt, like all of the morality stuff that unraveled for me. And when I got to the Gospels, I was like, this is the fucking saint. I was like, this guy said that. They're saying the same fucking thing. So yeah, it was primarily like the soul, morality, and then once I realized that so much of it was just, kind of copied verbatim, and I was just like, that's it, I'm done. But like you, I was like, maybe I'll be a Buddhist. Maybe I'll be. It took a while to just let go of the God concept, and it was kind of shows like this and investigate. We have more calls. Sorry, I never shut up. You don't take charge.
No, it's great. I love hearing about your background. Well, we got two atheists calling in. We've got one from PA, one from Minnesota. I think John was here first, so we're going to bring up John. John says, what does Justin think of Gnostic text reference to Thomas, the twin of Jesus? Welcome in, John. You're talking to Justin and Shannon.
Hi, Justin. Hi, Shannon. Really quick, and I'll take your answer off the phone. I'd like both of your opinions about this. This is not something that I have any evidence for, other than in the rejected Gnostic Gospels, there are a number of texts that refer to Thomas, the twin brother of Jesus, and how that might figure into a theory of an imposter. He was the one that doubted that Jesus was. It would be kind of interesting to have truncated or found him as a character, sort of sanitized his character and put him as the doubting Thomas, whereas originally he was someone who looked very much like Jesus and was part of the Jesus group, and was sort of maybe he was the one that appeared to certain of the disciples, and they thought it was Jesus. And maybe, who knows, was there a rivalry between the two of them? We don't know. Did he want to take on that role? Was it something wishful thinking? So I don't know. I'm coming in cold from left field on this, and just I love the way you might be able to extrapolate, both of you, on this. I'm going to go offline now, or go off the phone right now, and just listen to what you have to say about it, if you have anything to say about it. But okay, take care. Bye.
Okay, so this is akin to like there's multiple theories of the Didymus. It means like twin in Greek, and so like the general idea is like Thomas Didymus might have looked like Jesus, or literally could have been the twin brother of Jesus. I don't think that really is the case, but it could have been the case. And so the general idea is that, like, hey, there was a lookalike right there in the text, and so there's a couple ways this plays out. So some people theorize that actually Thomas got crucified and not Jesus. Some people theorize that Jesus got crucified and that Thomas pretended to be the resurrected Jesus. There's a couple ways around this. I personally don't find the connection to be super tight, only because, like, so for example, like, people had names, like we'll call them nicknames, like the Sons of Thunder. We read of two of our disciples, right? So it's hard to know exactly if these additional descriptors really play into the storyline, or if they're just kind of coincidental. You know what I mean? Or it could be that Thomas had a twin in real life, and that his twin just wasn't one of the disciples. You know what I mean? Like, so for example, I'm a twin, and so I don't talk about this too much, but I have a twin. But all my life, my mother would get frustrated. You know, when you get frustrated, your brain starts to like misfire. My mom would misfire and get the wrong name when she was mad at either me or my brother. And so for a long time, when she would get mad, she just referred to us as twin. Hey, twin, come over here, you know, or like, it's very common for people when they didn't know my name to refer to me as a twin. You're one of the twins. I forget your name, but you're twin one or twin two. So I think if you are a twin or you have a twin, like, the moniker kind of follows you. But I don't know if I would ever think that Thomas was a twin of Jesus or that he looked like Jesus. I think it's probably just one of those historical coincidences that play into it. But that being said, if there was an imposter of Jesus, Could it have been somebody who ended up with the nickname Twin? I think it's conceivable. And that might play into how he got his nickname. That certainly is a conceivable option. I don't know how well I would rate that in probabilities. What do you think, Shannon?
I've lost the plot because I didn't realize that Thomas had a twin or Jesus had a twin. Like, where did that come from? Tell me where that came from. So Jesus had a twin brother. Where? When? How? What? Why?
So it's not in the text. This is something that you have to like add into it because of the name of Thomas, and it goes hand in hand with imposter theory.
The name of Thomas. Tell me what the name of Thomas has to do with it.
So
talk to me like I'm an idiot because I am.
So like, Matthew had two names. It was Matthew and also Levi. Thomas had two names. It was
okay.
Yep. So Thomas's alternative name was Didymus, which in Greek just means twin.
Oh, okay. Okay. So that could mean that he was someone's twin. But it doesn't tell me whose twin he is.
Right.
Or that he's Jesus' twin. It just tells me maybe he's a twin or looks like somebody, so they called him twin. Right. Yeah. I don't know. I just this is my first exposure to this imposter theory. So I'm wrapping my head around it as we go. I subscribe to a different resurrection explanation, church starting, not resurrection explanation, start of the church explanation, I think, more so than resurrection explanation. But it's not outside of the realm of possibility, I wouldn't think. But I don't know how much evidence there is for it, especially like, so I have so many questions about your imposter thing. We know that Peter, or at least we assume that Peter knew Jesus, probably that James knew Jesus, although it is very strange because in the Gospels, Jesus' brothers were like, fuck you, essentially. James would be starting a church, but that's neither here nor there. So if there was some sort of imposter, wouldn't Peter have recognized that it wasn't Jesus? Like, even if it's a twin, like your mother would know the difference between the two of you. Somebody who knows twins well would know a difference, let alone an imposter. And we know
so that's
Peter
the fun
was...
thing about...
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
That's the fun thing about imposters is we don't know which one of them saw the imposter, right?
Okay.
Right, so I'm not saying that all the disciples saw the imposter. What I am suggesting is that somebody saw an imposter and was willing to believe it and willing to share it with the others. So, for example, if it was Mary Magdalene... Okay. Well, that would explain why Mary Magdalene didn't recognize Jesus at the tomb, thought it was the gardener. And even, remember?
Yeah.
He has to like, hey, I'm Jesus. I'm not the gardener. But even at the commissioning of the disciples, we get really weird sayings. So it says... Now the 11 disciples went to Galilee to the mountain which Jesus had directed them. When they saw him, they worshipped him, but they doubted. Why? Why would you doubt that was Jesus? Didn't Thomas put his finger in the hole? Like what's happening here, right? So we have these inklings in the text that something's off. And so it's weird that anyone would doubt or not recognize Jesus after he rose. They should just recognize him. Also, it's weird because when Mary sees him at the tomb, he says, "Don't touch me," right? Because he's apparently in a state where he can't be touched. But then he tells specifically Thomas to touch him.
Yeah. Interesting. Oh, that's interesting. Okay. I haven't thought about a lot of this stuff just because I think that like either a liar. Yeah. Did you bring me coffee? Fuck yeah. Sorry. That's Paul. That's my partner, Paul. Sorry. He brought me coffee.
So
and water, hopefully.
These really weird anomalies in the text, right? And so like they could just be like people writing a story, just making dumb mistakes. Or it could be that these are like, there's some genuine memories being preserved here. And they just happened. It's hard to separate the genuine memories from the mythology. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I mean, that region at that time was just rife with apocalyptic preachers just roaming. And like, they're just everywhere. Like, I really, truly think that John kind of was that too. Like, I believe that John definitely existed so much so that they needed to, and probably had definitely had his own following. We know that he definitely had his own following, and
Yeah.
they kind of needed to co-opt him as now like kowtowing to Jesus in the gospel. So like you see those like. Anywho, yeah, I'll have to think more about it. Is it plausible? Yes. Have I thought enough about it? No. And I
Right.
still think that a possible bereavement hallucination, which could actually even overlap. Like if you see somebody, even if they don't claim to be Jesus, even if they're not like, yo, guys, I'm Jesus, I rose from the dead, it is so easily possible, especially when you're in a state of grief, to see somebody in passing and like make a mistake or have a legitimate hallucination. And then hold, like, you've given up your entire life at this point. You're very invested. You already believe that this person is potentially God, or maybe you don't. I don't know, depending on if you think the
Right.
Gospels added that later. But definitely somebody to found your church on. So I'm going to think about. I'll think about it more.
It's certainly interesting. One of the other issues that one of your favorite topics is the zombies in Matthew. This is
I do love the
another
zombies. Everyone ignores
such
them.
a key that it's mythology, because the zombies only make sense if you believe that Jesus is coming back soon to grant eternal life, because otherwise their resurrection is meaningless. That means they resurrected and then, years later they just died again. What was the point of that? Well, the point would have made sense if Jesus really was coming back within their lifetime. That means they were the first of the resurrected, and then when Jesus comes back very soon, the rest of us will be resurrected. But that didn't happen. They died again. They died 3 times, essentially, if you think the lake of fire is the third death.
Oh, interesting. So it's a literary device to say, don't worry, guys, the first wave is already left. You didn't see it, but we know that it happened. So like,
right.
Round one of us being called up to God, like literally they crawled out of their graves and just, got, what do you call it, raptured or whatever. Although when you get raptured, you just disappear. But interesting.
It's the
interesting.
first
That's interesting.
scene of when you were a Christian, did you hear already but not yet? That was saying.
No, I was an Anglican, so I was like Catholic light. So
okay.
I wasn't as, I wouldn't say devout, but being a Christian wasn't my entire personality, like it seems to be for some people. Like Paul, being a Christian was his entire personality. Like the church was his social life, and every decision that he made was entirely related to like supporting the church and supporting God, and like propel. Like I wasn't as much like that, so yeah, no, I didn't hear a lot of the same sort of evangelical phrases that, that a lot of people are familiar with.
That's it.
I wasn't a real
You're not
Christian,
missing
as
too
Paul
much.
said.
Well, I mean, you're not missing much. You probably had some good sayings, but either way, it's neither here nor there. We do have Julia on the line, an atheist from Minnesota, says also considered religious OCD and scrupulosity. I don't know what this word is. How to combat after leaving religion. We'll see if we can work through this. Julia, welcome in. You're on the line with Justin and Shannon. How are you? Can you fill out kind of what you're calling about?
Yeah. So it's called scrupulosity, and I was curious if Shannon had any advice or experience with this. I heard you had a psychology degree, so decided to call in. But it's essentially OCD of the religious or moral variety. And I definitely dealt with it while I was still a Christian, but I've found that a lot of the moral side of it has still come over into my atheism, and I didn't know if you had struggled with that or had any advice on how to combat that after leaving the faith.
So when you say scrupulosity, do you mean that are you having trouble discerning or disentangling your moral system from the moral system of the church? Is that what you mean? Or is it more like a moral injury where you feel as though you've either been a party to something or observed something in the past that now contradicts with your moral framework, and there's guilt associated with that. Can you explain it a little better to me, please?
More that it is very difficult not to view morality as something that other people need to align to. So like when you're within Christianity, it's often, like you need to bring people into the faith so that they have the correct moral framework because the Bible is the truth. But then once you're outside of that and you see that the Bible is not actually a good moral framework, but I still have difficulty not wanting to kind of correct other people. But on the other side of it, of like, like that's really transphobic. How do I bring them into the quote unquote correct viewpoint? And it's like almost a compulsion. So
you feel like
to do so.
Like an imperative to recruit people into your moral system.
Kind of, yeah. Yeah, that would be a good way to put it.
Okay. Well, to me, I don't know that I have that imperative, like on an individual basis, to feel as though I need to recruit people into my moral system. I think that, I can't remember the name of the philosopher I was reading. It was, I know that the paper was written in the 70s. My gosh, I wish I could remember. But he was essentially arguing that if you can do something like mundane to support people, that it's a moral imperative that you should do that. Similarly, I feel as though if I am witnessing something that is immoral, I have an obligation to interact with it, or try to stop it. Like if there's something within my power I can do that isn't going to harm me, or even if potentially it might harm me and I can protect somebody else, that I should do it. That's part of my individual moral system. You brought up transphobia. And we could just swap that word out with bigotry in general, because I think that would apply like in large swaths, like just bigotry in general. Do you feel as though it's not a good thing to try to convince people to not be bigots, or that that's something that you shouldn't do?
It's more the like, maybe I guess you could apply like it's more black and white thinking, in that I get very stuck in that if like they're not convinced by my argument, then I need to continue. Okay. Like I don't know when to.
You don't want to stop,
because instead of the threat of like hellfire for them, where the concern was like, oh my gosh, like if I don't convince them of this, like they're literally going to burn for eternity. Now the motivation is, oh my gosh, like they're living with this extremely hateful view, and it's detrimental to not only them but those around them. And yeah, so it's like it was replaced just with a different framework.
Do you think it was just like flat out replaced with a different framework? And I'm asking this for a specific reason, and it's in relation to like my deconversion. So I've mentioned before, while Justin and I were talking, that morality, my concept of morality, was one of the things that was a linchpin of my deconversion, because I felt as though the Bible contradicted my innate feelings of morality, and also contradicted what the church was preaching to me about morality in multiple places. That put me into a bit of a crisis that it took me a while to get through. And what that crisis was I don't know what my moral system is, right? Like I have no idea what a moral system is, even, because I believe kind of like a divine command theory version of like pulpit preached morality, where people told me what was right and wrong. So I needed to work on figuring out how to support, like to how to have a backbone of my moral system. So I started reading moral philosophy, and I started really thinking about it. I started writing out why things were right and wrong and making flowcharts and trying to understand it. And as a result, I feel as though my system of morality is like I have a far better grasp on an understanding of, what is or isn't moral, and I can support it better. Like I can provide reasons now better than I was able to then. So as a result, I'm more confident in my conceptualization of right and wrong now than I was then, and I have less dissonance about how my innate feelings about what is right and wrong might contradict with what somebody else tells me, but I might have to do it anyway. Those sorts of things, and it's not based on fear; it's based on reason. So that makes it easier for me to explain to people. Like if people ask me why I think something is right or wrong, I can give them definitive reasons. Like I can support it. So I don't feel as though it was just replaced. I feel like it's something that you have to work at, right? Like, have you gone through to kind of try to figure out what your morals are based on? Like, have you like done the work and put in the investment and trying to like really suss out like what is my conceptualization of morality? What does it mean to me and why?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I can pretty much put the framework down to increase in well-being and decrease in harm.
Okay.
But I don't necessarily think that I have. I'm not very good at explaining to people well what my thoughts and arguments are. Like I obviously watch a lot of you guys and have heard many of the different arguments, but I feel like when it comes to someone that I love, like there's an extra emotional layer there. And I don't know if like the debate format is necessarily a good way to bring someone alongside.
No, not generally.
So
Not generally. People aren't generally very responsive with being told that they're wrong. That immediately puts them on the defensive.
Yeah.
Have you ever? I'd like to recommend a book actually. It's called How Minds Change. Yeah. Let me see if I can look it up for you just to make sure that I'm saying.
I actually have that in my to be read pile right now. I will push David it towards the top.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
It's by David McGraney. I actually had a conversation with him, a long form conversation on my channel about his book and about mind changing. It's a very nuanced and complex and robust topic. I'm not going to be able to give you an answer definitively, like, oh, just do this and this in this moment. I can tell you that just saying you're wrong, I'm right, here's why is never a success strategy for moving the needle on somebody's belief system. And people don't just snap in a moment. I've never had an experience where I've had a conversation. In the middle of the conversation, somebody goes, you know what? I changed my mind about my entire belief system. And I think I'm in line with you. That's not the way it works. It wasn't the way that it happened for me either. Those types of changes are iterative. Like they happen in like small increments over the course of time. It is a death by 1,000 cuts scenario. It is not like a hard cut. That is not the way it works. It's not satisfying to hear that, but it's the truth. And in most instances, I think if you put people in a situation themselves and ask them to do an assessment and then provide their own reasons, they start to realize that their moral system actually kind of does come in line once they have to provide reasons. Like once you present them with a hypothetical and say, like, this is the way I approach it. Can you explain how you approach it differently? Maybe I can understand better where you're coming from. A good strategy is also, like I said, if at first, before you tell somebody that you think they're wrong, you go through the work of demonstrating to them that you're at least understanding what their initial position is, that removes a lot of the frustration. And it also is eye-opening. It gives you more nuanced understanding of exactly what their position is without them being on their back heel, which is going to put them on the defensive in a combative mode. Then they're not going to be in the mood to listen. So, which is why I think dialectic is far better than debate on just every front. Like on just every front, I think dialogue is better than debate. Debate is about which team is going to win, and dialogue is about understanding and communication. And that's the way move the needle and shift things in my mind. But I would definitely recommend Dave McRaney's book, How Minds Change, to give you a perspective on that. And if you want to figure out how to communicate your positions better, I would recommend doing free writing. So like think of a topic that you want to discuss and then just write. Doesn't matter if things are spelled correctly. It doesn't matter if it's one run-on sentence. Doesn't matter if it's coherent. Just start at the top and write out everything you're thinking as you're thinking it at whatever pace you're able to write. And then take a minute, like step away from it after you're done, then come back to it later at a later time after you've had some distance away from it and read it and see how your words resonate to yourself. That's an exercise that I do quite frequently when I'm trying to work things out, because it also shows me where my emotions are inserted into my ideas and allows me to have the distance, like the material distance from my own thoughts, to actually kind of like make notes about what I wrote down and why I think I may have done that. And then the more I do that, the more refined the process becomes, the more I'm looking into aspects of things that I hadn't previously thought about or been aware of even in my own mind. And the better I can refine my ideas, understand them, and then ultimately communicate them, because once they're well refined and I understand them more myself, then it's easier for me to communicate them. If I can communicate them effectively to myself through practice, then I can do it with others more effectively. That's all I had. Sorry, Justin, I don't think I let you speak, so I will shut up now. Thank you, Julian.
No, I mean, all I'm going to
I
do
like your flowchart idea
what you were saying
as well.
Thanks. I like a flowchart.
I can't listen. I agree with everything. I can't add to that. I don't believe with real people in the real world that debating them is very effective. You know, most of what we do here is kind of for the listening audience. I'm under no impression that the person opposite of Shannon and I are going to like change their views. All of us left the faith through a large succession of waves of information and problems till eventually there was like a straw that broke the camel's back. So, but I do think it's important to engage in real life discussion, specifically about the data. And here's what I mean. I think most religious believers, like, they have a general concept of what they believe. It's not very specific sometimes. And then when you start showing them very specific instances within their general belief, then you can start to see cracks form, right? Because most believers, they believe it because they grew up in it. It was part of their culture, it was part of their family, and they just know the generic ideas. You tell them that, like, okay, God says you'd stone women if they don't bleed on their wedding night. Well, that's kind of hard to swallow. Numbers 31, God distributes little virgin girls as war booty to become war brides. And we know that, in fact, that they became war brides because the exact same thing happens in Judges 21 when they they kill all the men and kidnap the women to get brides for themselves. This is what they did. Or you go into the nonsense about how women are basically property for men in the Bible. They're not equal. They're property for men. They're just a step above cattle. You start drilling in all these very specific things about someone's belief, and then they are forced to reconsider what they believe because they don't really know the specifics all that well.
Yeah, that makes sense. And it's been really helpful listening to your live streams because, and I have your cheat sheet as well that helps me sort of get down to those specifics and have them easily accessible.
I think that's the key, right? Because because people make claims about the Bible, they'll say, well, the Bible is misogynistic, right? If you say that to somebody, that's not a meaningful claim until you can open the Bible and show them where it's misogynistic. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's fair.
Right. So big W for getting the cheat sheet. I appreciate that. And hopefully it's helpful to you.
Yeah, no, it's been extremely helpful. Kind of crazy that I know more about the Bible as an atheist than I did as a Christian.
Ain't that the way it goes generally? Preach, as it were.
Yeah, the road to atheism is made with many worn out Bibles.
Yeah, it's littered with Bibles that have been thrown across the room. For sure.
I'm actually really excited. I'm Juju Penguins in chat, and I have my Catholic Note-Taking Bible and New Oxford Edition Bible coming this week. And I have highlighters and sticky notes ready. So.
I have a Bible behind me. I don't know if you
can
see it.
Now that I know who you are, thanks for calling in.
Yeah, thank you. This was really awesome. I appreciate you guys.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Thanks for calling in. We'll talk to you again in the future, I'm sure. Have a good one, friend.
Sounds good. You too. Bye.
Oh my gosh. Touch my camera. I'm a disaster. I don't know why anybody has me on. I'm like fucking with my camera.
Deconstruction community.
Cool.
Mine is mine's on a mount, so I can't bump it by accident, but my cat does. So I'm never free of the same problems.
I have no one to blame but myself. I was trying to get it to show that there's a Bible on that shelf, which was a horrible idea because it's mirrored, evidently. So I turned it the wrong direction first and then couldn't center it again and need more ADD medication, evidently. Sorry, Justin. This is a great introduction to me. This is what I'm like all the time. So get used to it.
It is
a constant nightmare.
Not a problem. Not a problem at all. Well, we've got one more caller in queue. There's 30 minutes left in the show. Friends, if you want to call in, now's the time to do it. It's 720-619-2288. We would love to talk about your God if you believe in a God. It doesn't have to be the Christian God. And with that, we're going to bring in Joseph from South Dakota. Joseph says, I would like to talk about the topic for today's video. Is God real? Believe it's not the most relevant question. Well, welcome to the line, Joseph. You're talking to Justin and Shannon. What seems to be the problem here? You don't like what our show does?
No. First of all, hi, Justin and Shannon. I have been watching the show for a while. This is my first time calling, though, so forgive me if I get a little bit nervous. But okay. I'm very happy to be on the line with you guys. I very much respect the work that you guys do. I just think when it comes to the question at hand of like, is God real? I say I'm an atheist because I don't have any definitive proof one way or another to say like, yes, he does, or no, he doesn't, or didn't, or at any point. Because like, maybe aliens showed up, right? Like any sufficiently advanced technology and so on. So like, could a being have shown up and, sorry, what?
Any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. I was just making sure that's what you were referencing. Is that?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, is that like, even if some really powerful being showed up and was like, hey, my name is El or Yahweh or whatever other title you want to give me, I want you guys to worship me. I have no way of saying no because I wasn't there. I don't have any way of saying yes because I wasn't there. But it means as much as asking, like, is Peter David Jennings in Juneau, Alaska real? You know, because, like, as far as I know, sure, who cares? It really is not relevant. I just think that the
like
relevant question should be... Sorry, what?
You're saying he's like Schrodinger's Messiah?
Right. Like until he shows up and demonstrates his existence, like it really doesn't matter. It's clearly not having like a real impact on what's happening day to day, because like all this stuff continues to happen regardless of if he shows up or not. And I mean, there will be people that will argue until they are blue that he's the one facilitating all this. There's nothing to suggest that is true, except for maybe some text in a multiple times over translation of a book that was written thousands of years before any of us were born. But like, that's not really good, solid evidence of anything. Right.
Well, I think the lion's share of the world's religious population, or at least a good third of it or so, would disagree with you on that, because the Christians definitely think that that's pretty solid evidence, and I, at one point in time, did think that it was pretty solid evidence, and they
Well, and me too. Like
lived their lives.
I grew up in a background where I did try to be a good little Christian boy. I went to the regular classes that they had, that they were like, here's where you learn about the Bible and what it means and how you can apply it to your daily life. And I guess, like, I was always one of those kids that, like, as much as I really wanted to believe it, I still had questions. And so I continued to ask those questions, and I continued to run into people that were just like, stop questioning these things. You're just supposed to believe it. And I guess, like I say, I still feel like that's just really not the relevant point. Because, like, even if a powerful being exists or not,
relevance has a locus, right? So it gets oriented towards somebody. So when you say it's not the relevant point, maybe that's not the relevant point to you, but I think that the conversation surrounding it still is relevant. So what do you say when you, like, what do you mean when you say, well, it's not the relevant point?
I just mean, like I say, the world continues to behave as it does, regardless of if any superior beings show up, right? Like, the sun continues to come up roughly in the east, depending on what time of the year it is and where you are on the planet. The sun continues to cause the plants to grow, and rain continues to fall. All of these things continue to happen in the absence of a celestial father figure showing up and saying,
yeah,
I'm here to turn on the light switch so that the sun knows that it's daytime.
I mean, I would agree, because I think that it happens without it, because I'm an atheist. Like, I'm not even agnostic. I'm a full-on atheist, because I think most, if not all, any that I've been exposed to, I would say, concepts of God are either internally inconsistent, contain contradictions, or are impossible, or they're irrelevant. They're just so innocuous as to, like, basically be nothing. But to people who do believe, it's not about whether or not the sun comes up and the grass grows and, you know, life trudges on. It's about their eternal salvation, because they think that there's life after this. So for them, it is a relevant question, right? Like, once you're deconverted, or if you're agnostic, which it sounds like you are, it sounds like you feel like that, like, you don't have any evidence one way or the other. Like, you're not, you know, gonna, like, hang your hat on any one side, but you think it's irrelevant anyway, because you don't think that believing or not believing really matters. Christians would argue with you that it does matter, because you're messing with your forever, not just your now. And that's why it matters to them. And to be fair to them, if it is true, then it does matter. I think it's not true. But if we divorce ourselves from this time frame and this corporeal life in this realm of reality, in this universe, and think of ourselves as, you know, sort of like ethereal, eternal entities that have, you know, a divine dictator that is determining whether or not we go to the happy place or the sad place or are annihilated, then it does matter, right? Like, your orientation towards that is what makes it matter. Like, that is your reason. So whether the sun goes up, the earth goes around the sun, and, you know, the moon controls the tides, with or without the God, doesn't matter to those people, because if it's true, they want to be in the happy place forever, not gone forever or in the sad place.
Right. And I'm not trying to suggest, like, I want to dismiss people's feelings on the matter, because, like, I've always been of the mind of, like, it harm none, do what you will. Like, if you want to believe in something, fine. Like, I have absolutely no problem with it, as long as you're not using it as a justification to cause harm to others, or cause harm to yourself.
Yeah,
like
which
it's
they super
fine, do
fucking
whatever.
are.
And I'm sure
Yeah,
that
that's
there
the
are
problem is
there are people that have had
they're
like
going
their
to.
very
En masse.
real experiences. Right. And I just like I have friends that are
Joseph,
like fully pagan, that they believe in
Joseph, can I ask you a question?
like yeah, absolutely.
If 70% of the country believed in vampires and they wanted to enact vampire laws, so like, you know, you couldn't have garlic in your house and you certainly couldn't like sharpen broomsticks into steaks or anything like that. And then they wanted to teach your kids about how to be vampires as well and how to, you know, live in vampire society. And you were like, listen, I don't believe in vampires. Don't you think it would be a relevant question for you to go around asking people, hey, maybe vampires don't exist. Why do you believe in vampires? Don't you think that'd be a relevant question to you?
I guess if it was in the case where it would be directly affecting the life that I have or the life of the people that matter to me have, it would matter because it's if we're forming policy, like political policy or whatever, around the belief in vampires, then yeah, it would obviously be like we should keep separation of vampirism in the state. You know, like it would be a question that would need to be addressed, but I think that it's not going to make me suddenly start to go around telling people, you sharpen your steaks today? Like you got garlic bread on hand just in case? Like it's not the sort of thing that matters in that I'm not gonna.
We're not doing that. We're not knocking on people's doors telling them to stop believing in God. We're not going to schools telling them that you shouldn't believe in God. We're not enacting government policies saying that you can't believe in God. We open up a live stream where we say, listen, we don't think that your God is real. And it's a good starting point because most people believe that God is real. And I think because their God is real, they get to dictate how things happen. They get to dictate what laws we live by. They get to dictate what my children learn in school. It's relevant to me because I don't want those things to happen. I don't want to live in a theocracy. I don't want to live in Christian nationalism. I don't need any of that. I don't need Christo-fascism in America. So it's relevant to me and it's relevant to everyone who lives in this country. It's also relevant to the 9-year-old girl that's getting married off to a 40-year-old man in Iraq as we speak. It's very relevant to them. So when you're starting out with religion poisons everything. It invades everything. It affects your behavior. It affects your government. It affects everything, which means a perfect place to start is, hey, maybe your God isn't real.
Yeah, and I think it's also relevant to people who are coming out of, you know, cult environments or deconverting, because they're not always surrounded by others that are going through a similar experience that you can have these types of discussions with to help them suss through it. To, you know, I'm not making anybody watch this. I'm not making anybody call. People are, you know, of their own volition, tuning into the free content that I am generating online if it's of interest to them and relevant to them. And as evidenced by, I've received a lot of messages from people saying, I didn't feel as alone. Like I felt like I was understood. I felt like, oh my gosh, like somebody else. I'm not the only one who thinks this way. Or, oh, okay, that explains that problem I was having in a way that resonates with me. So it's not even like if you took all of let's just say that no Christian, no Muslim, no Zoroastrian has ever used religion to try to sway society to do anything at all. I still think it's relevant to have these conversations because people want to have a good epistemology and people want to feel as though there's resources out there to help them understand themselves and feel less alone. And talking about your experience and how it's similar and putting it in a publicly available forum is a manner in which to do
I
that
guess
that's
what I'm-
relevant to them.
I guess what I'm trying to say is, like Justin mentioned, that the problem isn't the faith. The problem is the religion. It's the organization of the people that are using this
can't
system of
separate 'em.
rules to
I
their
disagree.
benefit.
I think having flawed
You'll-
epistemology is bad for you as an individual. Like I spoke earlier about how I had a garbage moral system, right? Because I was just told what my moral system was supposed to be. So I hadn't actually gone through the work of generating a moral system and actually understanding it. That's evidence that I had a poor epistemological framework in my approach to how I operated within reality, which was a detriment to me and people I interacted with. So it's not just about what people do, it's about having good reasons to believe anything at all and creating the schematics mentally to have strong epistemological framework in order to accept truths, because the manner in which you accept things as true or false is a part of why society sucks right now, because people don't do any manner of source methodology. They believe things that reinforce their in-group bias en masse and then perpetuate it as though it's truth, to the point that like truth almost has no meaning because people don't have good or sound epistemologies. And that's a byproduct of having a really religious society where we have to like flout our epistemologies off, and because in order to be able to accept something we have to ignore them or have poor ones. So it's not just about the sun and the moon and what impacts me personally based on whether I believe or not. It's multifaceted.
Well, right, but it's because of the system of like these rules that were taught to you, these things that you were taught growing up, that this is right and wrong. Like we have this
not because of the
codified
system.
list
The
of the
system
things that
could
you're
have
not
been
supposed to do.
perfect. The system could have been perfect. The problem is I wasn't critically scrutinizing it or analyzing it.
Well, right, and that's what my point is that instead of the institution of like the religious institution teaching you these are the codified rules, instead what could have been offered was the framework of teaching you how you can build that moral system for yourself.
If that God is real, I don't get to have my own moral system. If that God is real, then what I have to do is follow the rules. That's the point. That's the point. If I found out tomorrow that God is real, I would have to really, really analyze to myself, shit, do I have to just go back to, do I have to say, fuck Euthyphro and just go back to following the rules because God said it? Because I don't want to get punished? Because now I know he's real? That's the point, right? If that God is real, that is my only choice. It's not just the system is built in order to create people who don't critically analyze. It is, and that's a problem. It's that if it's true, and the question is God real? Is it true? Specifically in my instance, the Christian God. I can't have a good epistem.
I don't know for myself, though. I can only answer from my own perspective. And that was that when I was growing up, like I said, I grew up trying to do the Christian thing. I tried to be, I grew up in a Roman Catholic house. I went to the classes and I was told these rules. And I was told, like, God is real and he wants you to do this. And I tried very hard. I really wanted to believe God was real. But even then, I was still asking, like, if God says these things are forbidden, why is he still getting to do these things? There's several things that are listed as, like, you do not do these, only I get to. And
yeah, well, if God is real, then he's the arbiter of morality. Hey, no. If God is real, he's the arbiter of morality. And any conceptualization or reason that we have for defining something as moral is irrelevant because his mandates are definitionally moral. Right? So that would mean that the reasons I have for understanding something as moral, which I've like, and for the sake I'm saying I don't believe this, but it would mean if God is real, that whatever reasons I have or justifications for saying something is or isn't moral are completely irrelevant, because God definitionally, anything that he mandates is absolutely moral by definition, and there is no questioning it.
I guess at that point, my response would be that, like, I would rather go to hell, I guess, than worship a hypocrite.
Or find out if God's real. Find out if God's real. Because if he's not real, it doesn't matter. Find out if God's real.
I already don't believe that God is real. I already don't have any evidence to believe that God is real. So I already don't believe that he is.
We're arguing anymore.
Yeah,
you said that question
I think you
doesn't
lost
matter.
a lot, Joseph. Yeah.
And we have another call waiting.
Joseph, we got another call waiting. We appreciate you calling in. I would give you a bit of advice for the future. Just because you don't see the utility in a particular approach doesn't mean there isn't utility in it. Like coming on to a call-in show and critiquing the main point of the call-in show because you don't like it is like... It's super boring and uninteresting for the audience. Like if you think you can do it better, we implore you start your own show and do it better, and then you won't have to worry about us. You don't have to worry about us plebeians over here doing it in a way that's not as good.
No, I'm sorry if that was the impression that you got of my question. I was not trying to suggest that you guys are doing it wrong. I was just trying to say that worldview-wise, the question of is God real shouldn't be the relevant point. I'm not saying that you guys were doing it wrong by any stretch of the imagination.
It's super fucking relevant. It's relevant to every human being that's ever lived in a religious society.
Which is all of them throughout history.
All right. Have a good one, Joseph. Think of how many religious wars could have been prevented if they didn't actually believe in their God.
Right? Think about how refined our moral systems and societal structures would be. Like, when I think about morality, like, it's one of the things that frustrates me the most, because you're like, well, there must be a moral lawgiver. I'm like, oh, sure, let's, for the sake of argument, say that you're right, must be a moral lawgiver. Then what you're saying is you're just relinquishing that morality requires any justification. You're just saying that whoever says something, the moment that you start to give reasons why something is moral, it stops being because God said so and starts being because morality requires justification. But people don't recognize that, and instead they just fall back on, because if morality doesn't require justification, you always have the escape hatch of going, God said so at the end. And if your God and your God say two different things, and because I said so is a good enough reason, then we can start killing each other over it because we both think we're standing on the moral high ground. Like, we would have such a more uniquely, robustly defined moral system as a society if we weren't referencing the tenets of something that we haven't even explored the foundations of. Anywho, thanks for coming to my TED Talk. We have one call left.
Well, let's get Charles from Virginia. Charles, an atheist, says his kids are Christian and wants to know the best way of trying to give them information. Welcome, you're on the line with Justin and Shannon. Charles, what kind of information do you think you'd like to give them?
Well, I gave them a video about UN 4 where you presented great slavery, genocide. They won't watch it because I know it's going to wreck their whole worldview. I was a Christian for 26 years, and I watched my mom die of brain cancer, a woman that read the Bible every night, and she was every ability in her life, so it made me start asking questions. But I don't want to force my beliefs on my kids like Christianity was forced upon me.
So
I agree.
I can tell you one thing. I grew up in a Catholic school, and my mom taught me how to think for myself and not just blindly regurgitate the stuff that I learned in Catholic school. And as a parent, you can give your children that ability. Just let them know, hey, listen, somebody might tell you something about a religion. You don't have to believe it. In fact, there's a lot of differing opinions. So, for example, I love the New Oxford Annotated Bible. It's an amazing Bible full of scholarly opinions on how to exegete passages properly. And what you'll find is most of the stuff in here that scholars talk about is not what you'll learn in church, right? So you can expose them to new ways of thinking about a religion without telling them, well, it's wrong, or you just shouldn't believe it. Say, well, here's what some other scholars think about it, right? And help to lead them at least into a point where they're thinking critically about how to interpret things, rather than, because what you can't do is you can't keep them away from religion. Someone's going to tell them about religion eventually, right? So my thing, right? You can't stop it. So teach them how to think critically.
I'm trying.
Yeah, I'm in the same situation.
I'm a new member of your destruction zone.
Oh, cool. I'm in the same situation as you, Charles. So I'm a divorced person with a teenager. I have a teenage son, and my orientation towards parenting is my job as a parent is twofold. Like, the two most important things I need to do are, one, teach him not to need me, and two, teach him how to think, not what to think.
Right.
So
I just don't like to
they go
see
hand in hand, right?
That
Teaching him how to think teaches him not to need me. So you need to ask them questions. Like, I've always told them, I give him an open space. Like, whatever you believe in, it's fine by me. I will never force you into a belief, because that would be counter to like my orientation towards the way that anybody should move through the world. But I want you to be able to justify what you believe. So if you find yourself with questions about something, talk to me, and then you and I can look together. But how would we figure out if this is true? What is your orientation? Why? Like, where are you? Like, if I put you, when he was a kid, I used to use colors. So I used to use red, yellow, and green for like a scale of, because they don't think in percentages when they're quite young, of like, I really don't believe this versus I'm kind of ambiguous on it versus I definitely do. So green would be more so definitely do. Like, where do you think it is? Is this like a red or a yellow or a green? And now I use percentages with him. And if he's more towards, belief than not, then I start asking him, well, what's your justification for that? Like, what made you think that? Like, do you think that that's a good reason? So I ask him questions. I ask him questions to teach him how to critically analyze. I don't try to tell him something is wrong. Just telling him something is wrong isn't going to teach him anything. I try to walk him through how to discover whether something is right and wrong. So, and create a space where he can do that without having to worry that I'm going to come at him if he gets the wrong conclusion.
Yeah, I know my daughter's gonna cry several nights thinking I'm going to hell, and I hate for her having to think that.
Ask her why she thinks
that. And I know that's what she's been taught.
What passage supports that? Did you hear that from somebody else? Is that something that you're just being told,
or do you
feel like you
because I don't believe?
Well, I'm honest because you don't believe in God, you're going to go to hell. But why does she think that? Right? Walk her through the why. Walk her through the why. Like, is there another alternative? Like, I know that some people believe in annihilationism, right? As opposed to that, I know that some of my partner's family kind of ended up sliding into annihilationism because they were grappling and they found scriptural support to justify that annihilationist position while retaining their faith. But that would at least alleviate some of that stress, which would be good for her, right? So, like, you can say, well, which passage says that that's going to happen? Are there passages that don't say that? Right? Like, is it possible that maybe there's an alternative? You need to make a comfortable space where you can walk through why young minds come to these conclusions. A lot of the reasons young minds come to the conclusions is because we tell them, right? We put them in a space or an environment, or we do it ourselves, where they're reliant on authority to survive. So they need to trust us. So they do.
Well, I mean, I've even tried, other beliefs like Hindu and
I don't.
But
Just
it
show her
just
how to
never made
think.
sense to me. I'll
Well,
try.
I don't think any of them
My
make sense for the same reason. Yeah.
I'll try. They're hard-headed like me.
Soft launch a how to think strategy. Like a how to think, soft
right.
launch it. Pick a thing that, like, it sounds like hell is really emotionally impacting her. That might be a place to start, because that one has the most emotional impact, and by virtue of that probably has the most relational impact between the two of you, because her worrying about that for you is going to impact how she interacts with you, which is it's such a sin. I'm so sorry about that. I would start with something like that and say, what's the support for it? Why did you come to this conclusion? Is there an alternate solution? How would we go about investigating it? And get her to come up with the conclusions and make a safe space for her to do that with you in a communication partnership, as opposed to you just saying, it's wrong, I don't believe it, you don't need to believe it, here's the reasons it's wrong. Give her the tools,
Right.
not the answer.
Cool. Well, I love you, Justin. You gave me a whole new look on the Bible since I've been listening to you. Alex kind of was my
Thanks a
first
lot, Charles.
step. And I've been listening to y'all for, I guess, going on 20 years now. So I appreciate everything y'all do. And y'all keep up the good work.
It's not
Absolutely.
possible.
Thanks
it's
for
my
calling in.
birthday
Good to hear from you,
tomorrow, when
friend.
I'll only be 25, so can't be 20 years.
Happy birthday, Shannon.
Yeah.
Have a great one, friend.
How would we find out if I'm telling the truth?
46. I'm old.
I'll be 44 tomorrow.
46 certainly could not be old.
Yeah, so that's why I was like, better not be.
I got a leg disease, so it feels old.
Don't do that to me.
Well, it's great to hear from you, Charles.
That's not a
Have
nice
a great
birthday
one, friend.
Well, y'all have a great night. Thank you.
Cheers.
You too.
That is hard. You don't want your kids to be indoctrinated, but you can't shield them from everything. It's kind of like, remember, I grew up with I went to a church where they would protect their kids from dissenting opinions. That wasn't my experience, but a lot of the kids in my church were kind of sheltered. And so that doesn't work. You can't shelter your Christian kids from the world, and you can't shelter your normal kids from the church. Like, they're going to mix at some point. You got to prepare them mentally on how to deal with that. You can't just hope for the best by putting them in a bubble.
And they've got the fucking internet. They can expose themselves to whatsoever their heart desires in myriad ways. So I really think that we need to focus not on protecting them, but arming them with the tools and strategies to be discerning in effective ways. That's what the answer is. Like, you can't just protect them from ideas that aren't ones that you subscribe to. That will never work. And actually, if your goal is, and I'm all about do your actions align with your ultimate goal, or your intent align with your ultimate goal? If your goal is to, keep them in that thought system, the more you shelter them, the easier it is to crack, because the less external exposure it takes, because they've never been exposed to how to deal with difficult questions. So when it comes under scrutiny, they're not armed with the tools to answer it, because it'll all just start unraveling, and with disastrous consequences to their mental health. So anywho, we're done. Sure.
Couldn't agree
Who's
more.
in charge
Yeah,
here?
we're at time. Shannon, thank you so much for joining me. I had a great time with you.
Ooh, I loved it. It was so nice to finally meet you. And I'm looking forward to binge watching more of your content. I'm gonna go finish watch. I had to stop watching you talk to G-Man, because I was like, oh my God, he just does the same thing over and over and over again.
He's so bad. He's so bad.
You were talking about prophecies. You'll have to tell me one day how you two got hooked up, because I was like, that is crazy. These two have met.
He hate watches me all the time.
Does he? I thought that he was gone. I have no